Okay, hello everyone. Welcome
to Dracula, chapters 17 through 20.
Yeah, got it all sorted. For anybody who wasn't here at the time, our boiler is broken. I was like, oh, the thermostat says in giant letters, boiler error, and the radiators haven't been on in about 2 days, and, well, we've had months now of not being able to consistently take hot showers. Maybe all of these things are connected. Okay. Wonderful. While I was talking with our landlord, I made a water bottle for myself and also for my child.
I snuck it in there. She did not wake up. Fingers crossed.
So I believe we're good to go. I've decanted fine Mountain Dew Code Red into a spooky Dracula cup just for this occasion. Oh my god. I should have oh my god, there's Prosecco downstairs. That would have been so perfect. No, it would be bad for my throat. No. No. We stick with water. All right. What the hell was even going on last time we read this, dude? We have finally proven to all the boys, all the boys of the yard, that that Lucy was a vampire. We had a very tearful situation where all the boys went and confronted Lucy when she was on the prowl looking for a kid to eat, and killed her vampire body and hopefully released her soul to heaven and saved her from damnation, maybe. So they all believe now. All the boys of the yard, they all believe. Arthur and Quincy and Dr. Seward and Van Helsing, I believe, was the gruesome foursome. Yes. Mina, our darling Mina, I believe has now met Van Helsing. So Team Bonk Dracula is starting to come together, right? Oh, what was happening? Yes, they went. They bonked Lucy. It was very sad. Arthur gave her a smooch. Their quest was done. Tonight I leave for Amsterdam and shall return tomorrow night, and then begins our great quest. But first I shall have much to say, so that you may know what it is to do and to dread, and then our promise shall be made to each other anew, for there is a terrible task before us, and once our feet are on the plowshare, we must not draw back. Right, so he has read, if I recall correctly, Van Helsing has been given all of Jonathan's writings, his diary, everything that happened when he was in Castle Dracula, so to speak. And so he now knows, like, oh fuck, there's a big pop of vampire out here, right? And we got to deal with it. I think just like preparing for and taking care of the situation with Poor sweet Lucy. It was the majority of our reading last time. Arthur did go through a lot. Poor Arthur. He's so much has happened to him. Obviously, arguably, way more has happened to Lucy, but but you know, he committed. He committed to the situation, and they saved Lucy. I think we talked a little bit about how, you know, because one of the things, one of the reasons that I am calling this the Boys of the Yard group is, aside from Van Helsing, all three of these men were in love with Lucy at one point or another, right? And so for all of them to, like, see her as a vampire and be like, what the fuck, right? Because in Dracula, it is, you know, it does have that, like, seduction element to vampires that is very common in media, where it's like there's just something, like, ethereally, like, beautiful and enticing about them, right? And there's a really sweet moment, I can't remember exactly where it is, but in the chapter when they when they kill her, there's a really sweet moment where it's like, yeah, she was beautiful as a vampire, but it wasn't Lucy, you know. And when this curse of vampireness has left her body, and what's left is, like, their Lucy, so to speak. All of them are so relieved to see her as she was, you know, as a human. And it's just very nice. It's very sweet. Serotan, welcome to the cat gang.
Or should we say the vampire gang tonight?
Oh, that's right, our warnings list. Oh, gosh. The warnings list is always a whole thing for Dracula. Okay, hold on. Really quickly, and then we'll get that going. Oops, nope, not that. Wait, what on earth? Oh, goodness. There it is. Dracula warnings. Yeah, vampires. Big warning. Blood, death, I'm trying to remember everything that we normally put on here. Period, typical racism, harmful depictions of mental health, I think animal death is another one that we had in there before. Found this list from a while ago. Abduction, death and murder, imprisonment, paranormal creatures, trichotillomania, suicide mention, animal death. Okay, yeah, I'll grab those. Thank you, Arnar. Yeah, we had, while reading, we had added on to this. Okay. Bad writing. Come on now. Come on now. Give Mr. Bram a break. Okie doke. Are we ready? Where is... Okay, let's remember where everybody is. We've got Dracula, Jonathan, Mina, Lucy, Dr. Seward? Yeah. Who's next? It's not Van Helsing. Where is it? Yeah, it is Van Helsing. Okay, Dr. Seward, Van Helsing. Oh my gosh, I have to remember all my hotkeys. Dracula, Jonathan, Mina, Lucy. We don't even need Lucy anymore, but we'll keep her there because we love her. Lucy, Dr. Seward, Van Helsing, and then Quincy. No, Renfield, Quincy, Arthur. Great. And then shift for an NPC. Okay, great. Angry, sad, angry. I don't think any of them, they don't have alternates. No. Okay, great. Great. But I love Lucy. Me too. This is what Arthur looks like. This is peak performance. You might not like it. But this man beat out this man, no, never mind. Arthur beat out this guy and this guy, okay? Peak performance. This is the female gaze, all right? Okie doke. Get my water bottle situated. Alrighty. Dr. Seward's diary. When we arrived at the Berkeley Hotel, Van Helsing found a telegram waiting for him. Am coming up by train. Jonathan at Whitby. Important news. From Mina Harker. The professor was delighted.
Ah, that woman, Madam Mina, he said, pearl among women. She arrived, but I cannot stay. She must go to your house, friend John. You must meet her at the station. Telegraph her en route so that she may be prepared.
When the wire was dispatched, he had a cup of tea. Over it, he told me of a diary kept by Jonathan Harker when abroad and gave me a typewritten copy, and also of Mrs. Harker's diary at Whitby.
Take these, he said, and study them well. When I have returned, you will be master of all the facts, and we can then better enter on our inquisition. Keep them safe, for there is in them much of treasure. You will need all your faith, even you who have had such an experience as that of today. What is here told, he laid his hand heavily and gravely on the packet of papers as he spoke, may be the beginning of the end to you and me and many another, or it may sound the knell of the undead who walk the earth. Read all, I pray you, with the open mind, and if you can add in any way to the story here told, do so, for it is all important. You have kept diary of all of these not-so-strange things, it is not so, yes? Then we shall go through all of these things together when we meet.
He then made ready for his departure and shortly after drove off to Liverpool Street. I took my way to Paddington, where I arrived about 15 minutes before the train came in. The crowd melted away after the bustling fashion common to arrive platforms, and I was beginning to feel uneasy, lest I might miss my guest, when a sweet-faced, dainty-looking girl stepped up to me, and after a quick glance said, "Dr. Seward, is it not?" "And you are Mrs. Harker?" I answered at once, whereupon she held out her hand. "I knew you from the description of poor dear Lucy, but—" She stopped suddenly, and a quick blush overspread her face. The blush that rose to my own cheeks somehow set us both at ease. It was a tacit answer to her own. I got her luggage, which included a typewriter, and we took the Underground to Fenchurch Street, after I had sent a wire to my housekeeper to have a sitting room and bedroom prepared at once for Mrs. Harker. In due time we arrived. She knew, of course, that the place was a lunatic asylum, but I could see that she was unable to repress a shudder when we entered. She told me that, if she might, she would come presently to my study, as she had much to say. So here I am, finishing my entry in my phonograph diary whilst I await her. As yet, I have not had the chance of looking at the papers which Van Helsing left with me, though they lie open before me. I must get her interested in something, so that I might have an opportunity to read them. She does not know how precious time is, or what a task we have at hand. I must be careful not to frighten her, for here she is. Mina Harker's Journal, September 29th. After I had tidied myself, I went down to Dr. Seward's study. At the door I paused a moment, for I thought I heard him talking with someone. As, however, he had pressed me to be quick, I knocked at the door, and on his calling out, "Come in," I entered. To my intense surprise, there was no one with him. He was quite alone, and on the table opposite of him was what I knew at once from the description to be a phonograph. I had never seen one, and was much interested. "I hope I did not keep you waiting," I said. "But I stayed at the door as I heard you talking. I thought there was someone with you."
"Oh," he replied with a smile, "I was only entering my diary."
"Your diary?" I asked him in surprise.
"Yes," he answered. "I keep it in this."
As he spoke, he laid his hand on the phonograph, and I felt quite excited over it. I blurted out, "Why, this beats even shorthand! May I hear it say something?"
"Certainly," he replied with alacrity, and stood up to put it in training for speak. Then he paused, and a troubled look overspread his face. "The fact is," he began awkwardly, "I only keep my diary in it. As it is entirely, well, almost entirely about my cases, it may be awkward. Well, that is, I mean—" He stopped, and I tried to help him out of his embarrassment.
"You helped to attend dear Lucy at the end. So let me hear how she died. For all that I know of her, I shall be very grateful. She was very, very dear to me."
To my surprise, he answered with a horror-struck look in his face. "Tell you of her death? Not for the wide world."
"Why not?" I asked, for some grave, terrible feeling was coming over me. And again he paused, and I could see that he was trying to invent an excuse. At length he stammered out,
Well, you see, I do not know how to pick out any particular part of the diary."
Even while he was speaking, an idea dawned upon him, and he said with unconscious simplicity in a different voice, with the naivete of a child,
"That's quite true. Upon my honor, honest Indian."
I could not but smile, at which he grimaced.
"Well, I gave myself away that time," he said. "But do you know that, although I have kept the diary for months past, it never once struck to me how I was going to find any particular part of it in case I wanted to look it up."
And by this time my mind was made up that the diary of a doctor who attended Lucy might have something to add to the sum of knowledge of that terrible being. I said boldly, "Then, Dr. Seward, you had better let me copy it out for you on my typewriter."
"Who's talking?"
He grew to a positively deathly pallor.
He said, No, for all the world I would not let you know that terrible story."
So then it was terrible. My intuition was right. For a moment I thought, and as my eyes ranged the room unconsciously looking for something or some opportunity to aid me, they lit on a great batch of typewriting on the table. His eyes caught the look in mine, and without his thinking followed their direction. As they saw the parcel, he realized my meaning. "You do not know me," I said. "When you have read those papers, my own diary and my husband's also, which I have typed, you will know me better. I have not faltered in giving every thought of my own heart in this cause, but, of course, you do not know me yet, and I must not expect you to trust me so far." He is certainly a man of a noble nature. Poor dear Lucy was right about him. He stood up and opened a large drawer, in which were arranged in order a number of hollow cylinders of metal covered with dark wax, and he said, "You are quite right. I did not trust you because I did not know you, but I know you now. And let me say that I should have known you long ago. I know that Lucy told you of me. She told me of you too, so may I make the only atonement in my power. Take the cylinders and hear them. The first half-dozen of them are personal to me. They will not horrify you. And then you will know me better. Dinner will by then be ready. In the meantime, I shall read over some of these documents and shall be better able to understand certain things." He carried the phonograph himself up to my sitting room and adjusted it for me. And now I shall learn something of pleasant, I am sure, for it will tell me the other side of a true love episode of which I know only one side already. And my kid just screamed, so I'll be
So I'll be right back. Okay, I think we might be all right. If I vanish, it's because we were not all right. Dr. Seward's diary, September 29th. I was so absorbed in that wonderful diary of Jonathan Harker and that other of his wife that I let time run on without thinking. Mrs. Harker was not down when the maid came running to announce dinner, and so I said, "She is possibly tired. Let dinner wait another hour." As I went on with my work, I had just finished Mrs. Harker's diary when she came in. She looked sweetly pretty, but very sad, and her eyes were flushed with crying. It somehow moved me. Of late I have had cause for tears, God knows, but the relief of them was denied from me, and now the sight of those sweet eyes brightened with tears. It went straight to my heart. I said as gently as I could, "I greatly fear I have distressed you."
"Oh, no, not distressed me," she replied. "But I have been more touched than I can say by your grief. It's a wonderful machine, but it is cruelly true. It told me in its very tones the anguish of your heart. It was like a soul crying out to Almighty God. No one must hear them spoken ever again. I've tried to be useful. I've copied out the words on my typewriter. None other need know. Now hear your... None other need now hear your heartbeat as I did."
"No one need ever know, or shall ever know," I said in a low voice.
She laid her hand on mine and said very gravely, "But they must."
"Must? But why?" I asked.
"It is part of the terrible story, a part of poor dear Lucy's death and all that led to it. In the struggle which we have before us to rid the earth of this terrible monster, we must have all the knowledge and all the help we can get. I think the cylinders which you gave me contain more than you intended me to know, but I can see that there are in your record many lights in this dark mystery. You will let me help, will you not? I know all up to a certain point, and I see already through your diary it only took me to 7th of September. How poor Lucy was beset, how her terrible doom was being wrought out. Well, Jonathan and I have been working day and night since Professor Van Helsing saw us. He's gone to Whitby to get more information, and he will be here tomorrow to help us. We need have no secrets amongst us. Working together and with absolute trust, we can surely be stronger than if some of us were in the dark."
She looked at me so appealingly, at the same time manifested such courage and resolution in her bearing that I gave in at once to her wishes. "You shall," I said. "Do as you like in the matter. God forgive me if I do wrong. There are terrible things yet to learn of, but if you have so far traveled on the road to poor Lucy's death, you will not be content, I know, to remain in the dark. The end, the very end, may give you a gleam of peace. Come, there is dinner. We must keep one another strong for what is before us. We have a cruel and dreadful task, and when you have eaten you shall learn the rest, and I shall answer any questions you ask. If there be anything which you do not understand, though it was apparent to us who were present."
Mina Harker's Journal, September 29th. After dinner, I came with Dr. Seward to his study. He brought back the phonograph from my room, and I took my typewriter. He placed me in a comfortable chair and arranged the phonograph so that I could touch it without getting up. He showed me how to stop it in case I want to pause, and then he very thoughtfully took a chair with his back to me so that I might be as free as possible, and began to read. I put the forked metal to my ears, and I listened. When the terrible story of Lucy's death and all that followed was done, I lay back in my chair, powerless. Fortunately, I am not of a fainting disposition. When Dr. Seward saw me, he jumped up with a horrified exclamation and, hurriedly taking a case bottle from the cupboard, gave me some brandy, which in a few minutes somewhat restored me. My brain was in a whirl, only that there came through all the multitude of horrors, the holy ray of light that my dear, dear Lucy was at last at peace. I do not think I could have borne it without making a scene. It is so wild and mysterious and strange. If I had not known Jonathan's experience in Transylvania, I could not have believed. As it was, I didn't know what to believe, and so I got out of my difficulty by attending to something else. I took the cover off of my typewriter, and I said to Dr. Seward, "Let me write this all out now. We must be ready for Dr. Van Helsing when he comes, and I have sent a telegram to Jonathan to come here when he arrives in London from Whitby. In this matter, dates are everything. I think if we get all of our material ready and have every item put in chronological order, we shall have done much. You tell me that Lord Godalming and Mr. Morris are coming too. Let us be able to tell him when they come." He accordingly set the phonograph at a slow pace, and I began to typewrite from the beginning of the 7th cylinder. I used manifold, and so took 3 copies of the diary, just as I had done with all the rest. It was late when I got through, but Dr. Seward went about his work of going round of the patients, and when he had finished, he came back and sat near me reading, so that I did not feel too lonely whilst I worked. How good and thoughtful he is. The world, it seems full of good men, even if there are monsters in it. Before I left him, I remembered what Jonathan put in his diary of the professor's perturbation at reading something in an evening paper at the station at Exeter, so, seeing that Dr. Seward keeps his newspapers, I borrowed the files of the Westminster Gazette, the Pall Mall Gazette. I took them to my room, and I remember how much the Daily Graph and the Whitby Gazette, of which I had made cuttings, helped us at understanding the terrible events at Whitby when Count Dracula landed. So, I shall look through the evening papers since then, and perhaps I shall get some new light. I'm not sleepy. The work will help to keep me quiet. September 30th, Dr. Seward's diary. Mr. Harker arrived at 9 o'clock. He had got his wife's wire just before starting. He is uncommonly clever, if one can judge from his face, and full of energy. If this journal be true, and judging by one's own wonderful experiences, it must be, he is also a man of great nerve. Going down to the vault a second time was a remarkable piece of daring, and after reading his account of it, I was prepared to meet a good specimen of manhood. Hardly the quiet, businesslike gentleman who came here today. After lunch, Harker and his wife went back to their own room, and as I passed a while ago, I heard the click of the typewriter. They are hard at it. Mrs. Harker says that they are knitting together in chronological order every scrap of evidence they have. Harker has got the letters between the consignee of the boxes at Whitby and the carriers in London who took charge of them. He is now reading his wife's transcript of my diary. I wonder what they make out of it. Strange that it never struck me that the very next house might be the Count's hiding place. Goodness knows that we had enough clues from the conduct of the patient Renfield. The bundle of letters relating to the purchase of the house were with the typescript. If only we had had them earlier, we might have saved poor Lucy, but that way is madness. Harker has gone back and is again collating his material. He says that by dinner time they will be able to show a wild, connected narrative. He thinks that in the meantime I should see Renfield, as hitherto he has been a sort of index to the coming and going of the Count. I hardly see this yet, but when I get all the dates, I suppose I shall. And what a good thing that Mrs. Harker put my cylinders into type. We never could have found the dates otherwise. I found Renfield sitting placidly in his room, with his hands folded, smiling benignly. At the moment, he seems as sane as anyone I ever saw. I sat down, I talked with him on a lot of subjects, all of which he treated naturally. He then of his own accord spoke of going home, a subject he has never mentioned, to my knowledge, during his sojourn here. In fact, he spoke quite confidently of getting his discharge at once. I believe that had I not had the chat with Harker and read the letters and the dates of his outbursts, I should have been prepared to sign for him after a brief time of observation. As it is, I am darkly suspicious. All those outbreaks were in the same way linked to the proximity of the Count, so what then does this absolute content mean? Can it be that his instinct is satisfied as to the vampire's ultimate triumph? He is himself Zoophagous. In his wild raving spoke of a master. This all seems confirmation of our idea. However, after a while I came away. My friend is just a little too sane at present to make it safe to probe him too deep with questions. He might begin to think, and then... Well, I came away. I mistrust these quiet moods of him. I have given the attendant a hint to look closely after him, and to have a straight waistcoat ready in case of need. Girl, guess who's next? It's been a while, but he is back again. Everybody give it up for Jonathan. Also, can we talk about what a fucking boss Mina is? She came in and was like, we need this typed out. We need to know when things are happening. We need the dates. We need the facts. We need to be able to put things in order. And all the dudes are like, yeah. Let's go, Mina. Let's fucking go, Mina. Anyways. Jonathan! Pew, 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 pew. September 29th. In train to London. When I received Mr. Billington's courteous message that he would give me any information in his power, I thought it best to go to Whitby and make on the spot such inquiries as I wanted. It was now my object to trace that horrid cargo of the Count's to its place in London. Later, we may be able to deal with it. Billington Jr., a nice lad, met me at the station and brought me to his father's house, where they had decided that I must stay the night. They are hospitable, with true Yorkshire hospitality. Give a guest everything and leave him free to do as he likes. They all knew that I was busy and that my stay was short, and Mr. Billington had ready in his office all the papers concerning the consignment of boxes. It gave me almost a turn to see again one of the letters which I had seen on the Count's table before I knew of his diabolical plans. Everything had been carefully thought out, and done systematically and with precision. He seemed to have been prepared for every obstacle which might be placed by accident in the way of his intentions being carried out. To use an Americanism, he had taken no chances. The absolute accuracy with which his instructions were fulfilled was simply the logical result of his care. I saw the invoice and took note of it. 50 cases of common earth to be used for experimental purpose. Also the copy of letter to Carter, Patterson, and their reply. Of both of these I got copies. This was all the information Mr. Billington could give me, and so I went down to the port and saw the coast guards, the custom officers, and the harbor master. They had all something to say of the strange entry of the ship, which is already taking its place in local tradition, but no one could add to the simple description. 50 cases of common earth. I then saw the station master, who kindly put me in communication with the men of the list. They had nothing to add except that the boxes were main and mortal heavy, and that shifting them was dry work. One of them added that it was hard lines, that there wasn't any gentleman such like as yourself, squire, to show some sort of appreciation of their efforts in a liquid form. Another put in a writer that the thirst then generated was such that even the time which had elapsed had not completely allayed it. Needless to add, I took care before leaving to lift forever and adequately this source of reproach. September 30th. The station master was good enough to give me a line to his old companion, the station master at King's Cross, so that when I arrived there in the morning I was able to ask him about the arrival of the boxes. He, too, put me at once in communication with the proper officials, and I saw that their tally was correct with the original invoice. The opportunities of acquiring an abnormal thirst had been here limited. A noble use of them had, however, been made, and again I was compelled to deal with the result of an ex post facto manner. From thence I went on to Carter, Patterson's central office, where I met with the utmost courtesy. They looked up the transaction in their daybook and letterbook, and at once telephoned to their King's Cross office for more details. By good fortune, the men who did the teaming were waiting for work, and the official at once sent them over, sending also by one of them the way-bill and all the papers connected with the delivery of the boxes at Fairfax. Here again, I found the tally agreeing exactly. The carrier's men were able to supplement the paucity of the written word with a few details. These were, I shortly found, connected almost solely with the dusty nature of the job and of the consequent thirst engendered in the operators. On my affording an opportunity, through the medium of the currency of the realm, of the allaying, at the later period, this beneficial evil, one of the men remarked,
"That 'ere house, governor, is the roomiest I've ever been, blimey. But it ain't been touched since 100 years. There was dust that thick in the place that you might have slept on it without hurting one of your bones. And the old place was that neglected that you might have smelled like old Jerusalem in it. But the old chapel that took the cake, that did. Me and my mate, we thought we would never get out quick enough. Law, I wouldn't take less than £1 a moment to stay there.
having been... I gave up at the end, I'm so sorry. Having been in the house, I could well believe him. But if he knew what I knew... Sorry. Having been in the house, I could well believe him, but if he knew what I know, he would, I think, have raised his terms. Of one thing I am now satisfied, that all the boxes which arrived at Whitby from Varna in the Demeter were safely deposited in the old chapel at Carfax. There should be 50 of them there, unless any have since been removed, as from Dr. Seward's diary, I fear. I shall try to see the carter who took away the boxes from Carfax when Renfield attacked them. By following up this clue, we may learn a good deal. Later, Mina and I have worked all day. We have put all of the papers into proper order.
God blimey.
Mina Harker's journal, September 30th. I'm so glad I hardly know how to contain myself. It is, I suppose, the reaction from the haunting fear which I have had, that this terrible affair and the reopening of his old wound might act detrimentally on Jonathan. I saw him leave for Whitby with as brave a face as I could, but I was sick with apprehension. The effort has, however, done him some good. He was never so resolute, never so strong, never so full of volcanic energy as at present. It's just as that dear, good Professor Van Helsing said. He is true grit. He improves under strain that would kill a weaker nature. He came back full of life and hope and determination. We've got everything in order for tonight, and I feel myself quite wild with excitement. I suppose one ought to pity anything so haunted as the Count. That is just it. This thing is not human. It is not even beast. To read Dr. Seward's account of poor Lucy's death and what followed is enough to dry up the sprigs of pity in one's heart. And later, Lord Godalming and Mr. Morris arrived earlier than we had expected. Dr. Seward was out on business and had taken Jonathan with him, so I had to see them. It was to me a painful meeting. It brought back all poor dear Lucy's hopes of only a few months ago. Of course they had heard Lucy speak of me, and it seemed that Dr. Van Helsing too had been quite blowing my trumpet, as Mr. Morris expressed it. Poor fellows. Neither of them is aware that I know all about the proposals they made to Lucy. They did not quite know what to say or to do, as they were ignorant of the amount of my knowledge, so they had to keep on neutral subjects. However, I thought the matter over and came to the conclusion that the best thing I could do would be to post them in affairs right up to date. I knew from Dr. Seward's diary that they had been at Lucy's death, her real death, and that I need not fear to betray any secret before the time, so I told them as well I could that I had read all the papers and the diaries, that my husband and I, having typewriting them, had just finished putting them in order. I gave them each a copy to read in the library, and when Lord Godalming got his and turned it over, it does make a pretty good pile. He said, Lord Godalming, is that Arthur? I think that's Arthur. Mr. Morris is Quincy. Yeah, yardy darty. But I think Lord Godalming is Arthur. Yeah, it is. I've checked. Okay. Anyways. Did you write all this, Miss Harker? I nodded, and he went on.
I don't quite see the drift of it, but you people are all so good and kind and have been working so earnestly and so energetically that all I can do is accept your ideas blindfold and try to help. I've had one lesson already in accepting facts that should make a man humble to the last hour of his life, and I know you loved my poor Lucy." Here he turned away and covered his face with his hands. I could hear the tears of his voice, and Mr. Morris, with instinctive delicacy, laid a hand for a moment on his shoulder. He then walked quietly out of the room. I suppose there is something in women's nature that makes a man feel free to break down before her, express his feelings on the tender or emotional side without feeling it derogatory, for when Lord Godalming found himself alone with me, he sat down on the sofa and gave way utterly and openly. I sat down beside him and took his hand. I hope he didn't think it forward of me, that if he ever thinks of it afterwards, he never will have such a thought. There I wrong him. I know he never will. He is too true a gentleman. And I said to him, for I could see that his heart was breaking, "I loved dear Lucy, and I know what she was to you, and what you were to her, and she and I were like sisters. Now she's gone. Will you not let me be like a sister to you in your trouble? I know what sorrows you have had, though I cannot measure the depth of them, and if sympathy and pity can help in your affliction, won't you let me be of some little service, for Lucy's sake?" In an instant the poor fellow was overwhelmed with grief. It seemed to me that all he had had of late had been suffering and silence, and it found a vent at once. He grew quite hysterical, raised his open hands, beat his palms together in a perfect agony of grief. He stood and then sat again, and the tears rained down his cheeks. I felt an infinite pity for him. I opened my arms unthinkingly, and with a sob he laid his head on my shoulder and cried like a weary child, lest he shook with emotion. We women have something of the mother in us that makes us rise above small matters when the mother spirit is invoked, and I felt this sorrowing man's hest resting on me, as though it were that of a baby that someday may lie on my bosom, and I stroked his hair as though he were my own child. I never thought at the time how strange it all was. But after a little bit, his sobs ceased, and he raised himself with an apology, though he made no disguise of his emotion. He told me that for days and nights past, weary days, sleepless nights, he had been unable to speak with anyone, as a man must speak in his time of sorrow. There was no one whose sympathy could be given to him, or with whom, owing to the terrible circumstances with which his sorrow was surrounded, he could speak freely. "I know now how I have suffered," he said. He dried his eyes. "But I do not know even yet, and none other can ever know, how much your sweet sympathy has been to me today. I shall know better in time, and believe me that, though I am not ungrateful, my gratitude will grow with my understanding. You will let me be like a brother, will you not, for all our lives, for dear Lucy's sake?" "For dear Lucy's sake," I said, as we clasped hands. "Aye, and for your own sake," he added, "for if a man's esteem and gratitude are ever worth the winning, you have won mine today. If ever the future should bring you a time when you need a man's help, believe me, you will not call in vain. God grant that no such time may ever come to you to break the sunshine of your life, but if it should ever come, promise me you will let me know." He was so earnest. His sorrow was fresh, and I felt it would comfort him, so I said, "I promise." And as I came along the corridor, I saw Mr. Morris looking out of a window. He turned as he heard my footsteps. "And how is ol' Art?" he said. Noticing my red eyes, he went on, "Well, I see you've been comforting him, poor old fella. He needs it. No one but a woman can help a man when he's in his trouble of a heart, and he's no one to comfort him." He bore his own trouble so bravely that my heart bled for him. I saw the manuscript in his hand, and I knew that when he read it, he would realize how much I knew. So I said, "I wish I could comfort all who suffer from the heart. Will you let me be your friend? Will you come to me for comfort if you need it? You will know later on why I speak." And he saw that I was earnest, and stooping took my hand and raised it to his lips and kissed it, and it seemed but poor comfort to so brave and unselfish a soul. Impulsively I bent over and kissed him. The tears rose in his eyes, and there was a momentary choking in his throat, and he said quite calmly, "Well, little girl, you'll never regret that true-hearted kindness so long as you live." He went into the study to his friend. Little girl! The very words he had used to Lucy.
But he had proven himself a friend. End of chapter 17. Everybody crying, dude. They went through a lot, dude. They all loved her. They were there to stake her. All these poor dudes. Mina's gonna hold them all together, dude. All right. Would you all like a short break to pee before we start the next chapter? Next chapter is decently long. It's quite a few pages, so. If you would like to pee, I will give you a moment. Yeah, it's all gearing up, dude. They're figuring out their shit. And then they're gonna be like, cool, let's go on to vampire, I guess. How am I? I'm doing good. Can't complain. It's really cold in the house. It's my husband. Hello, husband. Goodbye, husband. He came up the stairs and went, ugh, and then walked away. So. Hi. I'm reading Dracula. He trapped the cats in here. This madman. Why no Sam PNG? Well, keep in mind, it's activated by my microphone. So even if I like added a little Sam when he's in the room, we would both look like we were talking. I have thought about adding a little Clarky when she comes in, because sometimes Clarky kicks the door down and is like, it's my stream now. Alrighty. Are we ready to continue? Chapter 18. Dr. Seward's Diary, September 30th. I got home at 5 o'clock and found that Godalming and Morris had not only arrived, but had already studied the transcript of the various diaries and letters which Harker and his wonderful wife had made and arranged. That's right, she rocks. That's right. In this house we stand Mina. Anyways. Harker had not yet returned from his visit to the carrier's men, of whom Dr. Hennessy had written to me. Mrs. Harker gave us a cup of tea, and I can honestly say that for the first time since I've lived in it, this old house seemed like a home. When we had finished, Mrs. Harker said, Dr. Seward, may I ask a favor? I want to see your patient, Mr. Renfield. Oh, do let me see him. What you have said of him in your diary, it interests me so much. She looked so appealing. Okay, settle down. She looked so appealing and so pretty that I could not refuse her, and there was no possible reason why I should, so I took her with me. When I went into the room, I told the man that a lady would like to see him, to which he simply answered, What? Why? She is going through the house, and wants to see everyone in it, I answered. Oh, very well, he said. Let her come in, but wait a moment, I gotta tidy up the place. His method of tidying was peculiar. He simply swallowed all the flies and the spiders. Imagine. I'm sorry. Holy shit. Yeah. So yeah, it's very Renfield. It's just been so long since we've hung out with him. His method of tidying was peculiar. He simply swallowed all the flies and spiders in the boxes before I could stop him, and it was quite evident that he feared or was jealous of some interference. When he had gotten through his disgusting task, he said cheerfully,
Okay, let the lady come in.
He sat down on the edge of his bed with his head down, but with his eyelids raised so that he could see her as she entered. For a moment I thought he might have some homicidal intent, and I remembered how quiet he had been just before he attacked me in my own study. I took care to stand where I could seize him at once if he attempted to make a spring at her. She came into the room with an easy gracefulness which would at once command the respect of any lunatic, for easiness is one of the qualities mad people most respect. She walked over to him, smiling pleasantly, and held out her hand.
"Good evening, Mr. Renfield," said she. "You see, I know you, for Dr. Seward has told me of you."
He made no immediate reply, but eyed her all over intently with a set frown on his face. This look gave way to one of wonder, which merged in doubt, and then, to my intense astonishment, he said,
You're not the girl the doctor wanted to marry, are you? You can't be, 'cause you know she's dead.
Mrs. Harker smiled sweetly and replied, "Oh, no, I have a husband of my own, to whom I was married before I ever saw Dr. Seward, or he me. I am Mrs. Harker."
Then what are you doing here?
"Well, my husband and I are staying on a visit with Dr. Seward."
You shouldn't do that. Don't stay.
"Oh, but why not?"
I thought this style of conversation might not be pleasant to Mrs. Harker, any more than it was to me, so I joined. How did you know that I wanted to marry anyone?" His reply was simply contemptuous, given in a pause in which he turned his eyes from Mrs. Harker to me, instantly turning them back again.
What an asinine question.
"I don't see that at all, Mr. Renfield."
"Oh, I don't see that at all, Mr. Renfield," said Mrs. Harker, at once championing me. He replied to her with as much courtesy and respect as she had shown contempt to me.
Okay, it is you.
You will understand, Mrs. Harker, that when a man is so loved and honored as our host is, everything regarding him is of interest in our little community. Dr. Seward, he's loved not only by his household and his friends, but by his patients, who, being some of them hardly in mental equilibrium, are apt to distort causes and effects. Since I've been an inmate of a lunatic asylum, I can't help but notice that the sophistic tendencies of some of its inmates lean toward the errors of non causa and ignoratio elenchi.
I opened my eyes at this new development. What perfect Latin! Here was my oh my god. Some of the things Dr. Seward says. Here was my own pet lunatic, the most pronounced of his type that I had ever met with, talking elemental philosophy, and with the manner of a polished gentleman. I wonder if it was Mrs. Harker's presence which had touched some chord in his memory, if this new phase was spontaneous, or in any way due to her unconscious influence. She must have some rare gift or power. We continued to talk for some time, and seeing that he was seemingly quite reasonable, she ventured, looking at me questioningly as she began, to lead him to his favorite topic. I was again astonished, for he addressed himself to the question with the impartiality of the completest sanity. He even took himself as an example when he mentioned certain things.
Well, I myself am an instance of a man who had a strange belief. Indeed, it was no wonder that my friends were alarmed and insisted on my being put under control. I used to fancy that life was a positive, perpetual entity, and that by consuming a multitude of live things, no matter how low in the scale of creation, one might indefinitely prolong life. At times I held the belief so strongly that I actually tried to take a human life, and the doctor here will bear me out on that one. There was one occasion I tried to kill him, for the purpose of strengthening my vital powers by the assimilation with my own body of life through the medium of his blood. Relying, of course, upon the scriptural phrase, for the blood is the life. Anyway, indeed, the vendor of a certain nostrum has vulgarized the truism to the very point of contempt. Isn't that true, Doctor?
I nodded assent. I was amazed. I hardly knew what to think or say. It was hard to imagine that I had seen him eat up his spiders and flies not 5 minutes before. Looking at my watch, I saw that I should go to the station to meet Van Helsing, and so I told Mrs. Harker it was time to leave. She came at once after saying pleasantly to Mr. Renfield, "Goodbye. I hope I might see you often, under auspicious pleasanter to yourself." To which, to my astonishment, he replied,
Goodbye, my dear. I pray God I may never see your sweet face again. May he bless and keep you.
When I went to the station to meet Van Helsing, I left the boys behind. Poor Art seemed more cheerful than he's been since Lucy took ill, and Quincy is more like his own bright self than he has been for many a day. Van Helsing stepped from the carriage with the eager nimbleness of a boy. He saw me at once and rushed up to me, saying,
"Ah, friend John."
Can I just say, we got to have, the equivalent of a full chapter where I didn't have to do the Van Helsing voice. And what a blessing. What a beautiful time in our lives. Okay.
Ah, friend John, how goes it all? Well, so, I have been busy, for I come here to stay, if need be. All affairs settled with me, and I have much to tell. Madam Mina, is she with you? Yes, and her so fine a husband. And Arthur, and Quincy, they are with you too. Ah, good.
As I drove to the house, I told him of what had passed, of how my own diary had come to be of some use through Mrs. Harker's suggestion, at which the professor interrupted.
Ah, Madam Mina, how wonderful! She has a man's brain, a brain that a man should have were he much gifted, and a woman's heart. Good God fashioned her for a purpose, believe me, when he made that so good a combination. Friend John, up to now, fortune has made that woman of help to us. After tonight, she must not have to do with this so terrible of an affair. It is not good that she run risk so great. We men are determined, nay, are we not pledged, to destroy this monster? But it is no part for a woman. Even if she be not harmed, her heart may fail her in so much and so many a horror. Hereafter she may suffer, both in waking from her nerve and in sleep from her dream, and besides, she is a young woman, not so long married. There may be other things to think of sometime, if not now. You tell me she has wrote all, then she must consult with us. But tomorrow she must say goodbye to this work. We must go alone.
I agreed heartily, and then I told him what we had found in his absence, that the house which Dracula had bought was the very next one to my own. He was amazed, and a great concern seemed to come on him.
Oh, that we had known before, he said. Then we might have reached him in time to save poor Lucy. However, the milk that is spilt cries not out afterward. As you say, we shall not think of that, but go on our own way to the end.
And then he fell into a silence that lasted until we entered my own gateway. Before we went to prepare for dinner, he said to Mrs. Harker,
I am told, Madam Mina, by my friend John, that you and your husband have put up an exact order of all things that have been up to this moment.
Not up to this moment, Professor, she said impulsively, but yes, up to this morning.
But why not up until now? We have seen hitherto how good light all things have made. We have told our secrets, and yet no one who has told is the worse for it.
Mrs. Harker began to blush, and taking a paper from her pockets, she said, Oh, Dr. Van Helsing, will you read this? Tell me if it must go in. It is my record of the day. I too have seen the need of putting down at present everything, however trivial, but there is little in this except what is personal. Must it go in? The professor read it over gravely and handed it back, saying,
It need not go in if you do not wish it, but I pray that it may. It can but make your husband love you all the more, and all of us, your friends, more honor you, as well as more esteem and love.
She took it back with another blush and a bright smile. And so now, up to this very hour, all of the records we have are complete and in order. The professor took away one copy to study after dinner and before our meeting, which is fixed for 9 o'clock.
The rest of us have already read everything, so when we meet in the study, we shall all be informed as to facts, and can arrange our plan of battle with this terrible and mysterious enemy. Looking at chat now, seeing everybody like, Van Helsing, fucking shut up. Sorry, one sec. My landlady just texted about the boiler. He just likes to use his words. Well, I don't think that I don't think the people in chat are saying he's talking too much. I think they're saying, homie, he's being very, she's a woman, so she can't be involved in this, which, you know, I think you could read as he's trying to be a gentleman and be protective of her, but it can also be read as like, we're men, and so we need to do man things, and she's a woman and she needs to do woman things and not be involved in this. This woman is very woman, perhaps too much. I hope she doesn't die from feelings. Yeah, it's that. Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh my god, it's stinky in here. Sherlock, you're patoot. Okay. We continue. Look, it's fucking cold, okay? If my landlady is messaging me about the boiler, I will respond. I want it to fix, please. Okay. Mina Harker's journal, September 30th. When we met in Dr. Seward's study 2 hours after dinner, which had been at 6 o'clock, we unconsciously formed a sort of board or committee. Professor Van Helsing took the head of the table, to which Dr. Seward motioned him as he came into the room. He made me sit next to him on his right and asked me to act as secretary. Jonathan sat next to me. Opposite us were Lord Godalming, Dr. Seward, and Mr. Morris. Lord Godalming being next to the professor and Dr. Seward in the center. The professor said,
I may, I suppose, take it that we are all acquainted with the facts that are in these papers.
We all expressed assent, and he went on.
Then it were, I think, good that I tell you something of this kind of enemy with which we have to deal. I shall then make known to you something of the history of this man, which has been ascertained for me, so we can then discuss how we shall act, and take our measure accordingly. There are such beings as vampires. Some of us have evidence that they exist. Even had we not the proof of our own unhappy experience, the teachings and records of the past give proof enough for sane peoples. I admit that at the first I was skeptic. Were it not that through long years I have trained myself to keep an open mind, I could not believe until such time as that fact thundered on my ear. See! Prove! I prove! Alas! Had I known at the first what now I know, nay, had I ever guessed at him, one so precious life had been spared too many of us who did love her. But that is gone, and we must so work that other poor souls perish not whilst we can save. The Nosferatu do not die like the bee when stung once. He is only stronger, and being stronger have yet more power to work evil. This vampire which is among us, in himself so strong in person as 20 men, he is of cunning more than mortal, for his cunning be the growth of ages. He has still the aid of necromancy, which is, as his etymology imply, the divination by the dead, and all the dead that can come nigh to are for him at command. He is brute, more than brute. He is devil and callous, and the heart of him is not. He can, within limitations, appear at will, when and where, and in any of the forms that are to him. He can, within this range, direct the elements, the storm, the fog, the thunder. He can command all the meaner things, the rat, the owl, the bat, the moth, the fox, the wolf. He can grow and become small. He can at times vanish and become unknown. How, then, are we to begin our strike to destroy him? How shall we find his where, and having found it, how can we destroy it? My friends, this is much. It is a terrible task that we undertake, and there may be consequence to make the brave shudder. For if we fall in this, if we fail our fight, he must surely win, and then where end we? Life is nothing. I heed him not. But to fail here is not mere life and death. It is that we became as him, that we henceforth become foul things of the night, without heart or conscience, preying on the bodies and souls of those we love. To us forever are the gates of heaven shut, for who shall open them to us again? We go on for all time, abhorred by all, a blot on the face of God's sunshine, an arrow in the side of him who died for man. But we are face to face with duty, and in such case must we shrink? For me, I say no, but then I am old, and life with his, life with his sunshine, his fair places, his song of birds, his music, his love lie far behind. But you others, you are young. Some have seen sorrow, but there are fair days yet in store. So, what say you?
Whilst he was speaking, Jonathan had taken my hand. I feared so much that the appalling nature of our danger was overcoming him when I saw his hand stretch out, but it was life to me to feel his touch. Strong, so self-reliant, so resolute. A brave man's hand can speak for itself. It does not need a woman's love to hear its music. When the professor had done speaking, my husband looked in my eyes, and I in his. There was no need for speaking between us. "I will answer for Mina, and myself," he said.
"Well, count me in, Professor,"
said Mr. Quincy Morris.
Laconically, as usual.
"I am with you," said Lord Godalming, "for Lucy's sake, if for no other reason." Dr. Seward simply nodded. The professor stood up, and after laying his golden crucifix on the table, held out his hand on either side. I took his right hand, Lord Godalming his left. Jonathan held my right with his left and stretched across to Mr. Morris. As we all took hands, our solemn compact was made. I felt my heart icy cold, but it did not even occur to me to draw back. We resumed our places, and Dr. Van Helsing went on with a sort of cheerfulness which showed that the serious work had begun. It was to be taken as gravely and in as businesslike a way as any other transaction in life.
Well, you know what we have to contend against. But we, too, are not without strength. We have on our side power of combination, a power denied to the vampire. We have source of science. We are free to act and think. The hours of the day and the night are ours equally. In fact, so far as our powers extend, they are unfettered, and we are free to use them. We have self-devotion in a cause, and an end to achieve, which is not a selfish one. These things are much. Now, let us see how far the general powers arrayed against us are restrict, and how the individual cannot. In fine, let us consider the limitations of the vampire in general, and of this one in particular. All we have to go upon are tradition and superstition. These—
Please move, Sherlock, I adore you.
These do not at the first appear much. When the matter is one of life and death, nay, of more than life and death, yet must we be satisfied. In the first place, because we have yet to be. No other means is at our control, and secondly, because after all these things, tradition, superstition, are everything.
Oh my god, this man talks so much. Jesus Christ. Homie, we get it. Okay. I just get mad because the hardest voice for me to do, the one that takes the biggest toll on my throat, is the man that just cannot stop talking for the life of him. Okay.
Does not the belief in vampires rest for others, though not, alas, for us on them? A year ago, which of us would have received such a possibility in the midst of our scientific, skeptical, matter-of-fact 19th century? We even scouted a belief that we saw justified under our very eyes. Take it, then, that the vampire and the belief of its limitations and its cure rest for the moment on the very same base. For, let me tell you, he is known everywhere that men have been. In old Greece, in old Rome, he flourished in Germany all over, in France, India, even the Chinese, in China, so far from us in all ways. There, even he is, and the peoples fear him at the day. He have follow the wake of the Berserker Icelander, the devil-begotten Hun, the Slav, the Saxon, the Magyar. So far, then, we have all that we may act upon. Let me tell you that very much of the beliefs are justified by what we have seen in our own so unhappy experience. The vampire live on and cannot die by mere passing of the time. He can flourish when he can fatten on the blood of the living. Even more, we have seen amongst us that he can grow younger, that his vital faculties grow strenuous, and seem as though they refresh themselves when his special pabulum is plenty. He cannot flourish without his diet. He eat not as others. Even friend Jonathan, who lived with him for weeks, did never see him eat. Never! He throws no shadow. He make in the mirror no reflect, as again Jonathan observed. He has the strength of many of his hand. Witness again, Jonathan, when he shut the door against the wolves, and when he help him from the diligence too, he can transform himself to wolf. As we gather from the ship arrival in Whitby, when he tear open the dog, he can be as bat, as Madam Mina saw in the window at Whitby, and as friend John saw him fly from this so near a house, and as my friend Quincy saw him at the window of Miss Lucy. He can come in mist, which he create. That noble ship's captain proved him of this. But, from what we know, the distance he can make this mist is limited, and it can only be round himself. He come on moonlight rays as elemental dust, as again Jonathan saw those sisters in the castle of Dracula. He becomes so small, we ourselves saw Miss Lucy, ere she was at peace, slip through a hair-breadth space at the tomb door. He can, when once he finds his way, come out from anything, or into anything, no matter how close it can be bound, or even fused with fire, solder as you call it. He can see in the dark. No small power this, in a world which is one half shut from the light. Ah, but hear me through. He can do all these things, yet he is not free.
I just looked over at chat and saw somebody say, why use 5 words when 50 will do? Oh my god. Okay.
Nay, he is even more prisoner than the slave of the galley, than the madman of the cell. He cannot go where he lists. He who is not of nature has yet to obey some of nature's laws. Why, we know not. He may not enter any—
Oh my god. Oh my god. He talks so much I just turned the page and I got depressed. It's the Urianshe way, dude. Like, he's just a big nerd ball, okay? They try to make him so cool in the movies sometimes. He's like, you can be a big dork and also be cool. I get that, but like, he's just a nerd, okay? Like, he just like that's who he, at the end of the day, Van Helsing's a big old nerd. And I love that for him. I don't love it for my throat, but I love that for him. He's a big old nerd, and he happens to be the big old nerd that has the information that's going to keep everybody alive. So, like, you know, let him talk, I guess. Dracula's just the story of a bunch of nerds taking down a vampire. Basically, honestly, this guy, the coolest guy. He is the most dude. He's the most dude out of all of them. He just shows up and is like, what's up, y'all? We killing a vampire? A hot dog. Right? Like, that's his whole thing. Yeah. Look. Van Helsing has his interests. He's really, he hyper-focused on vampires, and now he is depositing all of the information into our ears. And it turns out that sometimes he goes around in circles, but you know what? He gets there in the end. So, Chat made strippin' go cat girl. I don't know what that means. Do you have ears for him? Do I have what, cat ears? He's looking for cat ears? It's unfortunate. Our child just packed up all of her headbands. So, all of the headbands with cat ears are in a box that's all taped up. So that's unfortunate. As a neurodivergent, boy, do I relate to Van Helsing. Let the man talk. You know what? I'll just let him talk. Just let him get it all out. It's just unfortunate that it has to come through my vocal cords. Okay, let's go. We're back in.
He may not enter anywhere at first, unless there be one of the household who bid him come, though afterward he can come as he please. His power ceases, as does that of all evil things at the coming of the day. Only at certain times can he have limited freedom. If he be not at the place whither he is bound, he can only change himself at noon or at exact sunrise or sunset. These things are we told, and in this record of ours we have proof by inference. Thus, whereas he can do as he will within his limit, then he have his earth home, his coffin home, his hell home, the place unhallowed, as we saw when he went to the grave of the suicided Whitby. Still, at other times, he can only change when the time has come. It is said, too, that he can only pass running water at the slack or the flood of the tide. There are things which so afflict him that he has no power, as the garlic that we know of, and as for things sacred as this symbol, my crucifix, that was amongst us even now when we resolved, to them he is nothing. But in their presence he takes his place far off and silent with respect. There are others too which I shall tell you of, lest in our seeking we may need them. The branch of wild rose on his coffin keep him, that he move not from it. A sacred bullet fired in the coffin kill him, so that he be true dead. And as for the stake through him, we know already of its peace, or the cut-off head that giveth rest. We have seen it with our eyes. Thus, when we find the habitation of this man that was, we can confine him to his coffin and destroy him, if we obey what we know. But he is clever. I have asked my friend Arminius of Budapest University to make his record, and from all that means that are, he tell me of what he has been. He must indeed have been that voivode Dracula, who won his name against the Turk, over the great river on the very frontier of Turkeyland. If it be so, then he is no common man, for in that time and for centuries after he was spoken of as the cleverest, the most cunning, as well as the bravest of the sons of the land beyond the forest. That mighty brain and the iron resolution went with him to his grave and are even now arrayed against us. The Draculas were, says Arminius, a great and noble race, though now and again were scions who were held by the Covels to have dealings with the evil one. They learned his secret in the Scholomance, amongst the mountains over Lake Hermanstad, where the devil claims the 10th scholar as his due. In the records are such words as Strgoica, witch, Ordog, Pokol, Satan, hell. In one manuscript, this very Dracula is spoken of as Wampir, which we all understand too well. There have been from the loins of this very one great man and good woman, and their graves make sacred the earth, where alone this foulness can dwell. For it is not the least of its terrors that this evil thing is rooted deep in all good. In soil barren of holy memories, it cannot rest.
Whilst they were talking, Mr. Morris was looking steadily at the window, and he now got up quietly and went out of the room. There was a pause, and then the professor went on. I was so excited for Quincy to talk, dude. I was so excited for Quincy to be like, well, the hot dog sounds like we're... But he left the room. No. Okay, no. This is good. He doesn't talk that much longer.
Now we must settle what we do. We have here much data, and we must proceed to lay out our campaign. We know from the inquiry of Jonathan that from the castle to Whitby came 50 boxes of earth, all of which were delivered at Carfax. We also know that at least some of these boxes have been removed. It seems to me our first step should be to ascertain whether all the rest remain in the house beyond that wall where we look today, or whether any more have been removed. If the latter, we must trace, and here we were interrupted in a very startling way. Outside the house came the sound of a pistol shot. The glass of the window was shattered with a bullet which, ricocheting from the top of the embrasure, struck the far wall of the room. I am afraid I am at heart a coward. I shrieked. The men jumped to their feet. Lord Godalming flew over to the window and threw open the sash. As he did so, we heard Mr. Morris's voice without. Sorry. Fear I might have alarmed you. I'll come in and tell you all about it. A minute later, he came in and said, "Was an idiotic thing of me to do. I ask your pardon, Mrs. Harker, most sincerely. Fear I must have frightened you terribly, but fact is, whilst the professor was talking, there was a big old bat sat on the windowsill. I got such a horror of the damn brutes from recent events, I just can't stand 'em, so I went out to have a shot, and as I've been doing a late in the evenings whenever I've seen one, well, you used to laugh at me for it then, Art." "Did you hit it?"
asked Dr. Van Helsing. "Well, I don't know. I fancy not. Flew away into the woods." Without saying any more, he took his seat, and the professor resumed.
"We must trace each of these boxes."
I cannot believe we're... Okay. Hold on. Okay, it doesn't go. It doesn't go on for that much longer. Okay, we're okay. Let's go.
"We must trace each of these boxes, and when we are ready, we must either capture or kill this monster in its lair. We must, so to speak, sterilize the earth, so that no more he can seek safety. Thus, in the end, we may find him in his form of man between the hours of noon and sunset, and so engage with him when he is at his most weak. For you, Madam Mina, this night is the end until all be well. You are too precious to us to have such risk. When we part tonight, you no more must question. We shall tell you all in good time. We are men. We are able to bear, but you must be our star, our hope, and we shall act all the more free that you are not in danger."
All the men, even Jonathan, seemed relieved. But it did not seem to me good that they should brave danger and perhaps lessen their safety, strength being the best safety, through care of me. Their minds were made up, and though it was a bitter pill for me to swallow, I could say nothing save to accept their chivalrous care. Mr. Morris resumed the discussion. "Well, there ain't no time to lose. Vote we have a look at his house right now. Time's everything with him. Swift action on our part may save another victim." I own that my heart began to fail me when the time for action came so close. I did not say anything. I had a greater fear that if I appeared as a drag or a hindrance to their work, they might even leave me out of their counsel altogether. They've now gone off to Carfax, which means to get into the house. Man-like, they told me to go to bed and sleep. In a man-like way, they said, "Don't worry about it, just go to bed." Man-like. They told me to go to bed and sleep, as if a woman could sleep when those she loves are in danger. I shall lie down and pretend to sleep, lest Jonathan have added anxiety about me when he returns. Yeah, I'll just go to sleep. That's a great idea. I would love to. Sleep? Why didn't I think of that? I will go to sleep. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. I'm just grabbing water. Oh. The Litra box needs more Litra. One sec. Oh
I'm out of cat litter. What the hell?
How did I not know that? How did I not know I'm out of cat litter? What the fuck? Alright, whatever. Okay. Okay, we got 4 more pages of this chapter. I'm gonna drink a little bit of water. Okay. We proceed. Look at all these. Oh. We really committed a lot of time and energy to this Dracula read through, and I appreciate us for that. Alrighty. Dr. Seward's diary, October 1st, 4 a.m. Just as we were about to leave the house, an urgent message was brought to me from Renfield to know if I would see him at once, as he had something of the utmost importance to say. I told the messenger to say that I would attend to his wishes in the morning. I was busy at the present. The attendant added, he seems very importunate, sir. I've never seen him so eager. I don't know, but what if you don't see him soon? He might have a violent fit. I knew the man would not have said this without some cause, so I said, all right, I'll go now. I asked the others to wait a few moments for me as I had to go and see my patient.
Take me with you, friend John, said the professor. His case in your diary interests me much, and it had bearing, too, now and again on our case. I should much like to see him, especially when his mind is disturbed.
Can I also come? Asked Lord Godalming. Yeah, me too, said Quincy. Can I come? I nodded, and we all went down the passage together. Oh, wait. Jonathan said, may I come? Can I? May I? Sure thing. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad we're getting along so well. Yeehaw, everybody. When this is all over, I'm just going to perform my own Dracula play with these BNGs. We appreciate it. The time and energy is appreciated. Oh, thanks, guys. I'm glad you guys have enjoyed. I've also enjoyed. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Do it from memory. Yeah, I'll just re-perform the whole thing. It's me, Jonathan. I'm gonna go to Transylvania. There's a guy who wants to buy a house there. What's up? It's me. I'm the guy buying the house, but you don't know me yet. Winky face. Anyway, I showed up in this town and everybody's giving cross signs and stuff and they think I'm gonna die. That's so ominous and weird, but it's fine. Yeah, I think I could do that. Rude and time to... Never mind. Oh my god. Where was I? Okay. We found him in a state of considerable excitement, but far more rational in his speech and manner than I had ever seen him. There was an unusual understanding of himself, which was unlike anything that I have met ever... which was unlike anything I had ever met with a lunatic. He took it for granted that his reasons would prevail with others entirely sane. We all 4 went into the room, but none of the others at first said anything. His request was that I would once release him from the asylum and send him home. This he backed up with arguments regarding his complete recovery, and adduced his own existing sanity. I appeal to your friends, he said. They will perhaps not mind sitting in judgment on my case, which, by the way, you haven't introduced to me, you silly goose. I was so much astonished that the oddness of introduction
Introducing a madman in an asylum did not strike me at the moment. Besides, there was a certain dignity in the man's manner, so much of the habit of equality that I at once made the introduction. This is Lord Godalming, Professor Van Helsing, Mr. Quincy Morris of Texas. Quincy Morris of Texas! That's cute. And Mr. Renfield. He shook hands with each of them, saying in turn, Lord Godalming, I had the honor of seconding your father at the Wyndham. I grieve to know by your holding the title that, he bit it. He was a man loved and honored by all who knew him. In his youth, he was, I heard, the inventor of a burnt rum punch. That was much patronized on Derby night. Mr. Morris, you should be proud of your great state. Its reception into the Union was a precedent which may have far-reaching effects hereafter, when the pole in the tropics may hold alliance to the stars and stripes, you know. The power of treaty may yet prove a vast engine of enlargement, when the Monroe Doctrine takes its true place as a political fable. And what shall any man say of his pleasure at meeting Mr. Van Helsing? Well, sir, I make no apology for dropping all forms of conventional prefix. When an individual has revolutionized therapeutics by his discovery of the continuous evolution of brain matter, conventional forms are unfitting, since they would seem to limit him to one of a class. Well, you, gentlemen, who by nationality, by heredity, or by possession of natural gifts, are fitted to hold your respective places in this moving world. I take to witness that I am as sane as at least the majority of men who are in full possession of their liberties. I am sure that you, Dr. Seward, humanitarian, medico-jurist, as well as scientist, will deem it a moral duty to deal with me as one to be considered as under exceptional circumstances. He made this last appeal with a courtly air of conviction, which was not without its own charm. We were all staggered, I think. For my own part, I was under the conviction, despite my knowledge of the man's character and history, that his reason had been restored. I felt under a strong impulse to tell him that I was satisfied as to his sanity, and would see about the necessary formalities to release him in the morning. I thought it better to wait, however, before making so grave a statement, for of old I knew the sudden change to which this particular patient was liable. I contented myself with making a general statement that he appeared to be improving very rapidly, that I would have a longer chat with him in the morning, that I would then see what I could do in the direction of meeting his wishes. This did not at all satisfy him. He said quickly, but, I fear, Dr. Seward, you hardly apprehend my wish. I desire to go at once, here, now, this very hour, this very moment. Time presses, and in our implied agreement, with the old scythe man, it is of the essence of the contract. I'm sure it's only necessary to put before an admirable practitioner as Dr. Seward so simple, yet so momentous a wish to ensure its fulfillment. He looked at me keenly. Seeing the negativity in my face, he turned to the others and scrutinized them closely, not meeting any sufficient response. He went on, Is it possible that I have erred in my supposition? Yes, you have, I said frankly, but at the same time I felt brutally. There was a considerable pause, and then he said, Then I suppose I must only shift my ground of request. Let me ask for this concession, boon, privilege, what you will. I'm content to implore in such a case, not on personal grounds, but for the sake of others. I'm not at liberty to give you the whole of my reasons, but you may, I assure you, take it from me that they are good ones, sound, unselfish. They spring from the heart, the highest sense of duty. Could you look, sir, into my heart, you would approve to the full the sentiments which animate me. Nay, more, you would count me amongst the best and truest of your friends. Again, he looked at us all keenly. I had a growing conviction that this sudden change of his entire intellectual method was but yet another former phase of his madness, and so determined to let him go on a little longer, knowing from experience that he would, like all lunatics, give himself away in the end. Van Helsing was gazing at him with a look of intensity, his bushy eyebrows meeting with the fixed concentration of his look. He said to Renfield in a tone which did not surprise me at the time, but only when I thought of it afterwards, for it was as one addressing an equal.
Can you not tell frankly your real reason for wishing to be free tonight? I will undertake that if you will satisfy even me, a stranger without prejudice, and with the habit of keeping an open mind, Dr. Seward will give you at his own risk, on his own responsibility, the privilege you seek.
He shook his head sadly and with a look of poignant regret on his face. The professor went on,
Well, come, sir, bethink yourself. You claim the privilege of reason in the highest degree, since you seek to impress us with your complete reasonableness. You do this, whose sanity we have reason to doubt, since you are not yet released from the medical treatment for this very defect. If you will not help us in our effort to choose the wisest course, how can we perform the duty which you yourself put upon us? Be wise. Help us. If we can, we shall aid you to achieve your wish.
He still shook his head and said,
Well, Dr. Van Helsing, I got nothing, my dude. Your argument is complete. If I were free to speak, I should not hesitate a moment, but I am not my own master in this matter. I can only ask that you trust me. If I am refused the responsibility, it's not on me. I did what I could.
I thought it was now time to end the scene, which was becoming too comically grave, so I went toward the door, simply saying, Come, friends, we have work to do. Good night. As, however, I got near the door, a new change came over the patient, and he moved toward me so quickly that for the moment I feared that he was about to make another homicidal attack. My fears, however, were groundless. He held up his 2 hands imploring me, and made his petition in a moving manner. As he saw that the very excess of his emotion was militating against him by restoring us more to our old relations, he became still more demonstrative. I glanced at Van Helsing and saw my conviction reflecting in his eyes. I became a little more fixed in my manner, if not more stern, and motioned to him that his efforts were unavailing. I had previously seen something of the same constantly growing excitement in him which he had made some request of. At the time, he had thought much, such, for instance, as when he wanted a cat. I was prepared to see the collapse into the same sullen acquiescence on this occasion. My expectation was not realized, for when he found that his appeal would not be successful, he got into quite a frantic condition. He threw himself on his knees. He held up his hands, wringing them in plaintive supplication, poured forth a torrent of entreaty, with the tears rolling down his cheeks, his whole face and form expressive of the deepest emotion. Oh, let me entreat you, Dr. Seward, let me implore you to let me out of this house, please, at once. Send me away how you will, where you will. Send keepers with me with whips, chains. They can take me in a waistcoat, manacled, leg-ironed, even to jail. Just let me get out of here, man. You don't know what you will do by keeping me here. I'm speaking from the depths of my heart, my soul, dude. You don't know whom you wrong or how, and I may not tell. Woe is me, and I may not tell. By all you hold sacred, by all you hold dear, by your love that is lost, by your hope that lives, for the sake of the Almighty, just take me out of here, dude. Save my soul from guilt. Can't you hear me, man? Can't you understand? Will you never learn? Don't you know that I am sane and earnest, that I'm not a lunatic in a mad fit? I'm just a dude fighting for his soul. Come on. Hear me. Just hear me and let me go. Let me go. I thought the longer this went on, the wilder he would get, and so would bring on a fit. I took him by the hand. I raised him up. Come, I said sternly. No more of this. We have had quite enough. Get to your bed, and try to behave discreetly. He suddenly stopped and looked at me intently for several moments, and then without a word rose and, moving over, sat on the side of the bed. The collapse had come, as on the former occasion, just as expected. When I was leaving the room, last of our party, he said to me in a quiet, well-bred voice, You will, I trust, Dr. Seward, do me the justice to bear in mind later on that I did what I could to convince you tonight. End chapter 18. Renfield. Is he just trying to get out of there? Or does he know it is wild to me, not to like spoil, but it is wild to me that they know that Renfield has a connection to Dracula, and he's like, guys, you gotta let me out of here, dude. Like, shit's gonna go down here, and I don't know, I'm pretty convinced I'm gonna be involved, but if you get me out of here, nothing will happen. Please? And they're like, this fucking guy. Like, come on, man. Ridiculous. Hi, kitties. What's up? Here, I'll open the... Sam closed the door, and so they're trapped in here, and now they're just staring at me. They're like an inch from my face. Come on, kids. Come on. What? Get out of here. Why are you looking at me like I'm gonna feed you? I already fed you. Don't do this. Would you trust someone who eats bugs and works for a serial killing demon? Okay. If you were like in a classroom, this is gonna be a terrible a way to try and describe this, but that's fine. I'm gonna commit to it. If you were in a classroom and there was one kid in your class who just like acted a little weird, and you you highly suspected that there was a telepathic link between the weird kid in your class and the teacher, right? And the kid in your class was like, guys, I really think, I know that I'm weird, and I know I say weird shit, and I know that, you know, normally you guys wouldn't listen to the shit that I gotta say, but I really think that we should all maybe read chapter 3. If you didn't know about the telepathic link with the teacher, you might be like, shut the fuck up, dude. But like, but he's got a telepathic link with the teacher, dude. Be like, well, you know what? It's worth being cautious. You know? So he eats bugs. So he has a deep interest in bugs. And he eats them sometimes. But he's got a fucking telepathic link with the teacher, dude. If the teacher hasn't told us to read chapter 3, it's not my problem. I see it's falling apart already. Hearing ominous creaking noises. Does the teacher know about the link and want you to fail? In this situation, yes. The teacher is an absolute piece of shit. And if you don't read chapter 3, you'll all die. There. Are the stakes high enough now? It's so stupid. Okay. Let's see. This chapter ain't too bad. It's not too long. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 pages. Okay, yeah, I'll listen to the kid. Ah, we got him. Okay. I didn't post a link. I've been framed. Sometimes the bot thinks a thing is a link when it's not a link. Okay. Give it another minute if people want to pee before we start the next chapter. And I'll eat a cashew. Are you excited for the Nick Cage Dracula film? Renfield? Yes. Do I think it's gonna be good? No. But I am very excited to watch it, yes. My point was Dracula could be manipulating them through Renfield. They think Drac needs Renfield free. Right. I don't know. I would at least do something. Like, they don't even... If that's the concern, right? If they're thinking, okay, well, Dracula plans to use Renfield, like, at least shackle him up, right? He even suggested it. He was like, you can put me in manacles, you can put me in a straitjacket, like, whatever you need to do, right? He suggested it, and they're like, nah, we'll just leave you we'll just leave you in here. I'm sure it'll be fine. Hi, Subbo. I just saw your pictures of the rabbit and his big wife. Okay. I'll give my throat a little rest. Had a couple cashews. Looked at some cute rabbits. And I think I'm ready to go. It looks so fun. I had said when I first saw the trailer, I was just like, I don't know that everything needs to be John Wick now, you know? I don't know that we needed Dracula to also be John Wick. But that's okay. I'll still watch it. Alrighty, let's go. Chapter 19. So we're halfway through, everybody. It is so dark in this room, but that's okay. It's mood lighting. Jonathan Harker's journal, October 1st, 5 a.m. I went with the party to the search with an easy mind. I think I never saw Mina so absolutely strong and well. I'm so glad that she consented to hold back and let us men do the work.
Somehow it was a dread to me that she was in this fearful business at all, but now that her work is done, and it is due to her energy and brains and foresight that the whole story is put together in such a way that every point tells, she may well feel that her part is finished, and she can henceforth leave the rest to us. We were, I think, all a little upset by the scene with Mr. Renfield. When we came away from his room, we were silent until we got back to the study. Mr. Morris said to Dr. Seward, "Say, Jack, if that man wasn't attempting a bluff, he's about the sanest lunatic I ever saw. I ain't sure, but believe he had some serious purpose. If he had, it was pretty rough on him not to get a chance." Lord Godalming and I were silent, but Dr. Van Helsing added,
"Friend John, you know more of lunatics than I do, and I'm glad of it. I fear that if it had been me to decide, I would, before that last hysterical outburst, have given him free, but we live and we learn, and in our present task we must take no chance. As my friend Quincy would say, all is best as they are."
Dr. Seward seemed to answer them both in a dreamy kind of way. "I don't know but that I agree with you. If that man had been an ordinary lunatic, I would have taken my chance of trusting him, but he seems so mixed up with the Count in an indexy kind of way that I am afraid of doing anything wrong by helping his fads. I can't forget how he prayed with almost equal fervor for a cat and then tried to tear my throat out with his teeth, and besides, he called the Count Lord and Master. He may want to get out to help him in some diabolical way. This horrid thing has the wolves and the rats and his own kind to help him. I suppose he isn't above trying to use a respectable lunatic. He certainly did seem earnest, though. I only hope we have done what is best. These things, in conjunction with the wild work we have in hand, help to unnerve a man." The professor stepped over and, laying his hand on his shoulder, said in a grave, kindly way,
"Friend John, have no fear. We are trying to do our duty in a very sad and terrible case, and we can only do as we deem best. What else have we to hope for, except the pity of the good God?"
Lord Godalming had slipped away for a few moments, and now he returned. He held up a little silver whistle, and he remarked, "That old place may be full of rats. If so, I've got an antidote on call." Having passed the wall, we took our way to the house, taking care to keep in the shadows of the trees on the lawn when the moonlight shone. When we got to the porch, the professor opened his bag and took out a lot of things, which he laid on the step, sorting them into 4 little groups, evidently one for each, and then he spoke.
"My friends, we are going into a terrible danger, and we need arms of many kinds. Our enemy is not merely spiritual. Remember, he has the strength of 20 men, and that, though our necks or our windpipes are of the common kind, and therefore breakable and crushable, his are not amenable to mere strength. A stronger man or a body of men more strong in all than him can at certain times hold him, but they cannot hurt him as we can be hurt by him. We must therefore guard ourselves from his touch. Keep this near your heart."
As he spoke, he lifted a little silver crucifix and held it out to me, I being nearest to him.
"Put these flowers around your neck."
Here he handed to me a wreath of withered garlic blossoms.
"For other enemies more mundane, this revolver and this knife, and for aid in all, these so small electric lamps which you can fasten to your breast. For all and above which you can, for all and above all, at last, this, which we must not desecrate needless."
It was a portion of sacred water, which he put in an envelope and handed to me. Each of the others was similarly equipped.
"Now,"
he said,
"Friend John,
we are..." I turned 2 pages at once. Wait, what the fuck? Hold on. Where? Oh my god. I was like, I got a word wrong back there.
Friend John, where are the skeleton keys?"
You can see why I was confused. "We are skeleton" just didn't seem right.
"If so that we can open the door, we need not break house by the window, as before at Miss Lucy's."
Dr. Seward tried 1 or 2 skeleton keys, his mechanized dexterity as a surgeon standing him in good stead. Presently he got one to suit. After a little play back and forth, the bolt yielded, and with a rusty clang shot backward. We pressed on the door, the rusty hinges creaked, and it slowly opened. It was startlingly like the image conveyed to me in Dr. Seward's diary of the opening of Miss Westenra's tomb. I fancy that the same idea seemed to strike the others, for with one accord they shrank back. The professor was the first to move forward, and stepped into the open door.
In manus tuas domine,
he said, crossing himself as he passed over the threshold. We closed the door behind us, lest when we should have lit our lamps we should possibly attract attention from the road. The professor carefully tried the lock, lest we might not be able to open it from within should we be in a hurry making our exit, and then we all lit our lamps and proceeded on our search. The light from the tiny lamps fell in all sorts of odd forms as the rays crossed each other, or the opacity of our bodies threw great shadows. I could not for my life get away from the feeling that there was someone else amongst us. I suppose it was the recollection so powerfully brought home to me by the grim surroundings of that terrible experience in Transylvania. I think the feeling was common to us all, for I noticed that the others kept looking over their shoulders at every sound, at every new shadow, just as I felt myself doing. The whole place was thick with dust, the floor seemingly inches deep except where there were recent footsteps, in which on holding down my lamp I could see marks of bob-nails where the dust was cracked. The walls were fluffy and heavy with dust, and in the corners were masses of spiders' webs whereon the dust had gathered until they looked like old tattered rags as the weight had torn them partly down. On a table in the hall was a great bunch of keys, with a time-yellowed label on each. They had been used several times, for on the table were several similar rents in the blanket of dust, similar to the exposed when the professor lifted them.
He turned to me and said, "You know this place, Jonathan. You have copied maps of it. You know it at least more than we do. Which is the way to the chapel?"
I had an idea of its direction, though on my former visit I had not been able to get admission to it. I led the way, and after a few wrong turnings found myself opposite a low, arched oaken door ribbed with iron hands.
"Ah, this is the spot,"
said the professor, as he turned his lamp on a small map of the house, copied from the file of my original correspondence regarding the purchase. With a little trouble we found the key on the bunch and opened the door. We were prepared for some unpleasantness, for as we were opening the door a faint, malodorous air seemed to exhale through the gaps, but none of us ever expected such an odor as we encountered. None of the others had met the Count at all at close quarters. And when I had seen him, he was either in the fasting stage of his existence in the rooms, or when he was gloated with fresh blood in a ruined building open to the air. Here the place was small and close, and the long disuse had made the air stagnant and foul. There was an earthy smell, as of some dry miasma, which came through it fouler still. It was not alone, but it was composed of all the ills of mortality, and with the pungent, acrid smell of blood. It seemed as though corruption had become itself corrupt. It sickens me to think of it. Every breath exhaled by that monster seemed to have clung to the place and intensified its loathsomeness. Under ordinary circumstances, such a stench would have brought our enterprise to an end, but this was no ordinary case, and the high and terrible purpose in which we were involved gave us strength which rose above mere physical consideration. After the involuntary shrinking consequence on the first nauseous whiff, we one and all went about our work as though the loathsome place were a garden of roses. We made an accurate examination of the place. The professor said, as we began,
"The first thing is to see how many of the boxes are left. We must then examine every hole and corner and cranny, and see if we can get some clue as to what has become of it."
A glance was sufficient to show how many remained, for the great earth chests were bulky, and there was no mistaking them. Only 29 left of the 50. Once I got a fright, for, seeing Lord Godalming suddenly turn and look out of the vaulted door into the dark passage beyond, I looked too, and for an instant my heart stood still. Somewhere, looking out from the shadow, I seemed to see the high lights of the Count's evil face, the ridge of the nose, the red eyes, the red lips, the awful pallor. It was only for a moment, but as Lord Godalming said, "Oh, I thought I saw a face, but I guess it was just shadow," and resumed his inquiry, I turned my lamp in the direction and stepped into the passage. There was no sign of anyone, and there were no corners, no doors, No aperture of any kind, only the solid walls of the passage. There could be no hiding place even for him. I took it that fear had helped imagination, and so I said nothing. A few minutes later I saw Morris step suddenly back from the corner which he was examining. We all followed his movements with our eyes, for undoubtedly some nervousness was growing on us. We saw a mass of phosphorescence which twinkled like stars. We instinctively drew back. The whole place was becoming alive with rats. For a moment or two we stood appalled, all save Lord Godalming, who was seemingly prepared for such an emergency. Rushing over to the great iron-bound oaken door which Dr. Seward had described from the outside, and which I had seen myself, he turned the key in the lock and drew the huge bolts, swung the door open, and then taking his little silver whistle from his pocket, he blew a low, shrill call. It was answered from behind Dr. Seward's house by the yelping of dogs, and after about a minute 3 terriers came dashing around the corner of the house. Unconsciously, we had all moved toward the door, and as we moved I noticed that the dust had been much disturbed. The boxes which had been taken out had been brought this way, but even in the minute that had elapsed, the number of rats had vastly increased. They seemed to swarm the place all at once, till the lamplight, shining on their moving dark bodies and glittering baleful eyes, made the place look like a bank of earth set with fireflies. The dogs dashed on, but at the threshold suddenly stopped and snarled, and then, simultaneously lifting their noses, began to howl in most lugubrious fashion. The rats were multiplying thousands, and we moved out. Lord Godalming lifted one of the dogs, and carrying him in, placed him on the floor. The instant his feet touched the ground, he seemed to recover his courage, and rushed at his natural enemies. They fled before him so fast that before he had shaken the life out of a score, the other dogs, who had by now been lifted in the same manner, had but small prey ere the whole mass had vanished. With their going, it seemed as if the evil presence had departed, for the dogs frisked about and barked merrily as they made sudden darts at their prostrate foes, and turned them over and tossed them in the air with vicious shake. We all seemed to find our spirits rise, whether it was the purifying of the deadly atmosphere by the opening of the chapel door, or the relief which we experienced by finding ourselves in the open, I know not. But most certainly the shadow of dread seemed to slip from us like a robe, and the occasion of our coming lost something of its grim significance, though we did not slacken a whit in our resolution. We closed the outer door, and barred and locked it, and bringing the dogs with us, began our search of the house. We found nothing throughout except dust in extraordinary proportions, and all untouched save for my own footsteps, which I had made when my first visits. Never once did the dogs exhibit any symptom of unease, and even when we returned to the chapel they frisked about as though they had been rabbit hunting in a summer wood. The morning was quickening in the east when we emerged from the front. Dr. Van Helsing had taken the key of the hall door from the bunch and locked the door in orthodox fashion, putting the key into his pocket when he had done.
"Well, so far," he said, "our night has been eminently successful. No harm has come to us, such as I feared might be, and yet we have ascertained how many boxes are missing. More than all, I do rejoice that this, our first and perhaps our most difficult and dangerous step, has been accomplished, without bringing thereto our most sweet Madam Mina, or troubling her waking or sleeping thoughts with sight and sound and smell of horror which she might never forget. One lesson, too, we have learned, if it be allowable to argue a particularity. The brute beasts, which are to the Count's command, are yet themselves not amenable to his spiritual power." Oops, I put the wrong button.
Hold on, I adjust. Boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop.
Where was I? I was reading some stuff that he was saying. Particulari, there we are. Beep.
For look, these rats that would come to his call just as from his castle top he summoned the wolves to your going, and to that poor mother's cry, though they come to him, they run pell-mell from the so little dogs of my friend Arthur. We have other matters before us, other dangers, other fears, and that monster, he has not used his power over the brute world for the only or the last time tonight. So be it that he has gone elsewhere, then good. It has given us opportunity to cry check in some ways in this chess game, which we play for the stake of human soul. And now let us go home. The dawn is close at hand, and we have reason to be content with our first night's work. It may be ordained that we have many nights and days to follow. If full of peril, we must go on, and from no danger shall we shrink.
The house was silent when we got back, save for some poor creature who was screaming away in one of the distant wards and a low moaning sound from Renfield's room. The poor wretch was doubtless torturing himself after the manner of the insane with needless thoughts of pain. I came tiptoe into our room and found Mina asleep, breathing softly, and I had to put my ear down to hear it. She looked paler than usual. I hope the meeting tonight had not upset her. I am truly thankful that she is to be left out of our future work and even of our deliberations. It is too great a strain for a woman. I did not think so at first, but I know better now, and therefore I am glad that it is settled. There may be things which would frighten her to hear, and yet to conceal them from her might be worse than to tell her if once she suspected that there was any concealment. Henceforth our work is to be a sealed book to her, till at least such time as we can tell her that all is finished, and the earth free from monster of the netherworld. I dare say it will be difficult to begin to keep silence after such confidence as ours, but I must be resolute, and tomorrow I shall keep dark over tonight's doings, and shall refuse to speak of anything that has happened. I rest on the sofa, so as not to disturb her. I'm sorry, so not only are they like, Mina, you can't come, you're a lady, but also they've all agreed to just not tell her anything? So they went to the house and and she was like, okay, I'll stay home, I guess. I'll stay in this house with people screaming in it. I'll stay here and try to get some sleep. But she doesn't even get to like find out. She put together all of their shit. She typed out everybody's accounts of what has happened in this story so far. Why does she not get to know what's going on? Because she has the psychic link with Dracula? No, not her. She's a normie. She's just a really smart, cool wife, dude. Oh my god. Yeah. When like, okay, look, out of pocket gender stuff aside, but like, Van Helsing was like, she has the mind of a man and the heart of a woman. It's an incredible combination of things. We'd be dead without her, basically. And then they were like, but we're not gonna use her anymore or let her be involved at all because we'll be so sad if she gets hurt. Which, like, okay. But, like, I know it's a product of its time, but, like, does she not get to, like, decide for herself if she's gonna help with this situation? Like, they're literally trying to destroy the guy that fully kidnapped and traumatized her husband. And she can't participate anymore. They've just voted her out. I'd be pissed. They weakest linked her. No. They're like, no, it's because we love you so much. We just love you so much that you have to stay home and not be involved. It's because we love you. Unreal. Okay. Sorry about all the breaks. My throat just needs the rest. If we ever fully do like a readathon, like I want to, I'm gonna need to have a plan, like a resting plan for my voice, and figure out what would be best to like be eating and drinking that day and stuff. Alrighty, let's go. October 1st. I suppose it was natural that we should have all overslept ourselves, for the day was a busy one and the night had no rest at all. Even Mina must have felt its exhaustion, for though I slept till the sun was high, I was awake before her, and had to call 2 or 3 times before she awoke. Indeed, she was so sound asleep that for a few seconds she did not recognize me, but looked at me with a sort of blank terror, as one looks who has been waked out of a bad dream. She complained a little of being tired. I let her rest until later in the day. We now know of 21 boxes having been removed, and if it be that several were taken in any of these removals, we may be able to trace them all. Such will, of course, immensely simplify our labor, and the sooner the matter is attended to, the better. I shall look up Thomas Snelling today. Dr. Seward's Diary, October 1st. It was towards noon when I was awakened by the professor walking into my room. Of course. Of course it was. Of course is the... Of course. Never mind. I'm not going to complain again. It's fine. He was more jolly and cheerful than usual. It is quite evident that last night's work had helped to take some of the brooding weight off of his mind. After going over the adventure of the night, he suddenly said,
"Your patient. He interests me much. May it be that with you I visit him this morning, or if that you are to occupy, I can go alone, if it may be. It is a new experience to me to find a lunatic who talks philosophy and reason so sound." I had some work to do which pressed, so I told him that if he would go alone I would be glad, as then I should not have to keep him waiting. I called an attendant and gave him the necessary instructions. Before the professor left the room, I cautioned him against getting any false impression of my patient. "But," he answered, "I want him to talk of himself, and of his delusion as to consuming live things. He said to Madame Mina, as I see in your diary of yesterday, that he had once had such a belief. Why do you smile, friend John?"
"Excuse me," I said, "but the answer is here." I laid my hand on the typewritten matter. When our sane and learned lunatic made that very statement of how he used to consume life, his mouth was actually nauseous with flies and spiders, which he had eaten just before Mrs. Harker entered the room. Van Helsing smiled in turn.
"Good," he said. "Your memory is true, friend John. I should have remembered, and yet it is this very obliquity of thought and memory which makes mental disease such a fascinating study. Perhaps I may gain more knowledge out of the folly of this madman than I shall from the teaching of the most wise. Who knows?"
Well, I went on with my work, and before long was through with that in hand. It seemed that the time had been very short indeed. There was Van Helsing, back in the study.
"Do I interrupt?"
he asked politely as he stood at the door. "Not at all," I answered. "Come in. My work is finished, and I am free. I can go with you now if you'd like."
"It is needless. I have seen him."
"Oh, and, well?"
"I fear he does not appraise me at much. Our interview was short. When I entered his room, he was sitting on a stool in the center with his elbows on his knees. His face was the picture of sullen discontent. I spoke to him as cheerfully as I could, and with such a measure of respect as I could. He seemed to make no reply whatsoever. "Don't you know me?" I asked, and his answer was not reassuring. He said, "I know you well enough. You are the old fool Van Helsing, and I wish you would take yourself and your idiotic brain theories somewhere else. Thick-headed Dutchman." Not a word more would he say, but sat in his implacable sullenness and indifference to me as though I had not been in the room at all. Thus departed, for this time, my chance of much learning from this so clever a lunatic. So, I shall go, if I may, and cheer myself with a few happy words from that sweet soul, Madame Mina. Friend John, it does rejoice me unspeakable that she is no more to be pained, no more to be worried with our terrible things, though we shall much miss her help. It is better so."
"I agree with you with all my heart," I answered earnestly. I did not want him to weaken in this matter. Mrs. Harker is better out of it. Things are quite bad enough for us, all men of the world, and who have been in many tight places in our time. It's no place for a woman. If she had remained in touch with the affair, it would in time infallibly have wrecked her. So, Van Helsing is gone to confer with Mrs. Harker and Mr. Harker. Quincy and Art are all out following up with the clues as to the earth boxes, and I shall finish my round of work, and we will meet tonight. I mean, she's staying out of it, you know? Nothing's gonna happen to her. Because she's out of it, guys. They've made sure. They've made sure that she's not involved. You know?
Mina Harker's journal, October 1st. It is strange to me to be kept in the dark as I am today. After Jonathan's full confidence for so many years, to see him manifestly avoid certain matters, and those the most vital at all. Well, this morning I slept late after the fatigue of yesterday, and though Jonathan was late too, he was the earlier. He spoke to me before he went out, never more sweetly or tenderly, but he never mentioned a word of what had happened in the visit to the Count's house. And yet he must have known how terribly anxious I was, poor dear fellow. I suppose it must have distressed him even more than it did me. They agreed it was best that I should not be drawn further into this awful work. I acquiesced, but to think that he keeps anything from me, and now I am crying like a silly fool when I know it comes from my husband's great love, and from the good wishes of these other men. It has done me good. Well, some day Jonathan will tell me all, and lest it should ever be that he should think for a moment that I kept anything from him, I shall keep my journal as usual, and then, if he has feared of my trust, I shall show it to him, and every thought of my heart put down for his dear eyes to read. I feel strangely sad and low-spirited today. I suppose it is the reaction from the terrible excitement. Last night I went to bed when the men had gone. Simple, because they told me so. I didn't feel sleepy. I did feel full of devouring anxiety. I kept thinking over everything that has been ever since Jonathan came to see me in London, and it all seems like a horrible tragedy, fate pressing on relentlessly with some destined end. Everything that one does seems, no matter how right it may be, to bring on the very thing which is most to be deplored. If I hadn't gone to Whitby, perhaps my poor dear Lucy would be with us now. She hadn't taken to visiting the churchyard until I came. If she hadn't come there in the daytime with me, she wouldn't have walked there in her sleep, and if she hadn't gone there at night and asleep, that monster couldn't have destroyed her as he did, and why did I ever go to Whitby? There, now I'm crying again, and I wonder what has come over me today. I must hide it from Jonathan. If he knew that I had been crying twice in one morning, I, who never cried on my own account, and whom he has never caused to shed a tear, well, the dear fellow would fret his heart out. I shall put a bold face on, and if I do feel weepy, he shall never see it. I suppose it is one of the lessons that we poor women have to learn. I can't quite remember how I fell asleep that night. I remember hearing the sudden barking of the dogs, a lot of queer sounds like the praying on a very tumultuous scale from Mr. Renfield's room, which is somewhere under mine. And then there was a silence over everything, silence so profound that it startled me. I got up, I looked out the window. All was dark and silent. The black shadows thrown by the moonlight seemed full of a silent mystery of their own. Not a thing seemed to be stirring, but all to be grim and fixed as death or fate, so that a thin streak of white mist that crept with almost imperceptible slowness across the grass toward the house seemed to have a sentience and a vitality of its own. I think the digression of my thoughts must have done me good, for when I got back into bed I found a lethargy creeping over me. I lay there a while, but I could not quite sleep. I got out and looked out the window again. The mist was spreading and was now close up to the house, so I could see it lying thick against the wall as though it were stealing up to the windows. The poor man was more loud than ever, and though I could not distinguish a word he said, I could in some way recognize in his tones a passionate entreaty on his part. There was the sound of a struggle, and I knew the attendants were dealing with him. I was frightened, and I crept into bed and pulled the clothes over my head, putting my fingers in my ears. I was not then a little bit sleepy, at least so I thought, but I must have fallen asleep. For except for dreams, I do not remember anything until the morning when Jonathan woke me. I think it took me an effort and a little time to realize where I was, and that it was Jonathan who was bending over me. My dream was peculiar, and was almost typical of the way that waking thoughts become merged in or continued on in dreams. I thought that I was asleep, and waiting for Jonathan to come back. I was very anxious about him, and I was powerless to act. My feet, my mind, my brain were weighted, so that nothing could proceed at the usual pace, and so I slept uneasily and thought. Then it began to dawn upon me that the air was heavy,
dank and cold. I put back the clothes from my face and found to my surprise that all was dim around. The gaslight which I had left lit for Jonathan was turned down, and came only like a tiny red spark through the fog, which had evidently grown thicker and poured into the room. It occurred to me that I had shut the window before I came to bed. I would have got out to make certain on the point, but some leaden lethargy seemed to chain my limbs and even my will. I lay still and endured, and that was all. I closed my eyes and could still see through my eyelids. It's wonderful what tricks our dreams will play on us, how conveniently we can imagine. Well then, the mist grew thicker, and I could see now how it came in, for I could see it like smoke, or white energy of a boiling water, pouring in not through the window, but through the joinings of the door. It was thicker and thicker, until it seemed as if it became concentrated into a sort of pillar of cloud in the room, through the top of which I could see the light of the gas shining like a red eye. Things began to whirl through my brain, just as the cloudy column was now whirling in the room, and through it all came the scriptural words, a pillar of cloud by day and of fire by night. Was it indeed some such spiritual guidance that was coming to me in my sleep? The pillar was composed of both the day and the night guiding, for the fire was in the red eye, which at the thought got a new fascination for me, till as I looked the fire divided and seemed to shine on me through the fog like two red eyes, such as Lucy told me of in the momentary mental wandering when on the cliff the dying sunlight struck the windows of St. Mary's Church. Suddenly the horror burst upon me that it was thus that Jonathan had seen those awful women growing into reality through the whirling mist in the moonlight, and in my dream I must have fainted. All became a black darkness. The last conscious effort which imagination made was to show me a livid white face bending over me out of the mist. I must be careful of such dreams. They would unseat one's reason if there were too much of them. I would get Dr. Van Helsing or Dr. Seward to prescribe something for me which would make me sleep, only that I feared to alarm them. Such a dream at the present time would become woven into their fear for me. Tonight I shall strive hard to sleep naturally, and if I do not, I shall tomorrow night get them to give me a dose of chloral. That cannot hurt me for once, and it will give me a good night's sleep. Last night tired me more than if I had not slept at all. October 2nd at 10 p.m. Last night I slept, but did not dream. I must have slept soundly. I was not woken by Jonathan coming to bed, but the sleep has not refreshed me. Today I feel terribly weak and spiritless. I spent all yesterday trying to read or lie down dozing. In the afternoon Mr. Renfield asked if he might see me. Poor man, he was very gentle. When I came away he kissed my hand and bade God bless me. In some way it affected me much. I cry when I think of him. It's a new weakness of which I must be careful. Jonathan would be miserable if he knew that I had been crying so much. He and the others were out till dinner time, and they all came in tired. I did what I could to brighten them up, and I suppose that the effort did me good. I forgot how tired I was. After dinner they sent me to bed, and all went off to smoke together, as they said, but I knew they wanted to tell each other of what had occurred to each during the day. I saw from Jonathan's manner that he had something important to communicate. I was not so sleepy as I should have been, so before they went I asked Dr. Seward to give me a little opiate of some kind. I had not slept well the night before. He kindly made me a sleeping draught, which he gave to me, telling me that it would do me no harm. It was very mild. I have taken it, and am waiting for sleep, which still keeps aloof. I hope I have not done wrong. As sleep begins to flirt with me, a new fear comes, that I may have been foolish in thus depriving myself of the power of waking. I might want it. But here comes sleep. Good night. End chapter 19. One chapter to go, dude. I'm sure she's fine. I'm sure she's fine. We don't need to worry about Mina. She's fine. The men are keeping her out of it. So she's gonna be fine. I am reading a book. Yep. We have one chapter left tonight. Yeah, the men are keeping her safe. She is a frail soft lady. All right. I'll give you a minute. Let's count and see how many pages we have left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oops. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 pages this time. So a little bit longer than the last chapter. So go pee if you need to. Is this the last chapter of the book? Nope. We just read 4 chapters at a time. There are 27 chapters in the book. So, 2 more streams and we'll have it crushed. Looking forward to the full read through of the Dresden Files. Oh my god. Only Creative Commons stuff can be read on stream. Pretty sure Dresden Files don't apply. Oop. Oh. Oh my god. Oh, it's still gonna... That's really funny. I'm typing in a thing really quick. Lol. Da, 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 da. Do you think you would want to read another book like this? Yeah, I've talked about it a lot. I'd love to do a readathon of another book. Books like Frankenstein would definitely be doable in a stream. Jekyll and Hyde is extremely short. Books like that are in the Creative Commons. But I would love to do them as charity streams. I think that would be really cool. There's a website called How Long to Read, and you can take books that are like open for public use and look them up on How Long to Read, and it'll give you how long it takes the average reader to read it. Since I'm like performing it, so to speak, when I read it out loud, it's not accurate to me. So like
when it says Jekyll and Hyde should only take like 2 hours to read, and like if I'm streaming it and I'm reading everything out, I would probably double that. So that's kind of the way that I've done the mental math so far. Yeah, Sherlock would be fun. I've got like the complete works of Sherlock Holmes, so that would be fun for sure. I don't read a lot on stream, but I want to. Oh god, I would not want to take a reading speed test. Okay. I've never read a light novel, no. All right. 1 chapter left. Are we ready? Here we go. Chapter 20. We are on page 267 of this book. We've really committed to this reading Dracula life. Jonathan Harker's journal, October 1st, evening. I found Thomas Snelling in his house in Bethnal Green, but unhappily he was not in condition to remember anything. The very prospect of beer, which my expected coming had opened to him, had proved too much, and he began too early on his expected debauch. I learned, however, from his wife, who seemed a decent, poor soul, that he was only the assistant to Smollett, who of the 2 mates was the responsible person. So, off I drove to Walworth, and found Mr. Joseph Smollett at home, and in his shirt-sleeves, talking a late tea out of a saucer. He is a decent, intelligent fellow, distinctly a good, reliable type of workman, and with a headpiece of his own. He remembered all about the incident of the boxes, and from a wonderful dog-eared notebook, which he produced from some mysterious receptacle about the seat of his trousers, had hieroglyphical entries in thick, half-obliterated pencil. He gave me the destinations of the boxes. There were, he said, 6 in the cartload which he took from Carfax and left at 197 Chicksand Street, Mile End, Newtown, and another 6 which he deposited at Jamaica Lane, Bermondsey. If, then, the Count meant to scatter these ghastly refugees of his over London, these places were chosen as the first of delivery, so that later he might distribute more fully. The systematic manner in which this was done made me think that he could not mean to confine himself in 2 sides of London. He was fixed on the far east of the northern shore, on the east of the southern shore, and on the south. The north and west were surely never meant to be left out of the diabolical scheme, let alone the city itself, and the very heart of fashionable London in the southwest and west. I went back to Smollett and asked him if he could tell us if any other boxes had been taken from Carfax. He replied, oh God.
Well, governor, you've treated me very handsome. I've given him half a sovereign, and I'll tell you all I know. I heard a man by the name of Bloxham say 4 nights ago in Hounds and Pincher's Alley, and how he had his mate had a rare dusty job, and the whole house are perfect. There and a man, he ain't jobs in this here, and I'm thinking that maybe Sam Bloxham could tell you something.
I asked if he could tell me where to find him. I told him that if he could get me the address, it would be worth another half-sovereign. He gulped down the rest of his tea and stood up, saying that he was going to begin the search then and there. At the door he stopped and said,
Look here, governor. Ain't no sense in me a keeping you here. I might find Sam soon or I mayn't. But anyhow, he ain't like to be in the way to tell you much tonight. Sam is a rare one when he starts on the booze. If you can give me an envelope with a stamp on it, put your address on it, I'll find out where Sam is to be found and post it to you tonight. But you'd better be up, Potter. I'm soon in the morning. Or maybe you won't catch him, for Sam gets off main early. Never mind the booze the night before.
This was all practical. So one of the children went off with a penny to buy an envelope and a sheet of paper and to keep the change. When she came back, I addressed the envelope and stamped it, and when Smollett had again faithfully promised to post the address when found, I took my way home. We're on track anyhow. I'm tired tonight. I want to sleep, and Mina is fast asleep and looks a little too pale. Her eyes look as though she'd been crying, my poor dear. I've no doubt it frets her to be kept in the dark, and it may make her doubly anxious about me and the others. But it is best as it is. Better to be disappointed and worried in such a way now than to have her nerve broken. The doctors were quite right to insist on her being kept out of this dreadful business. I must be firm, for on me this particular burden of silence must rest. I shall not ever enter on the subject with her under any circumstances, and indeed it may not be a hard task after all. She herself has been reticent on the subject, and has not spoken of the Count or his doings ever since we told her of our decision. October 2nd, evening. A long and trying and exciting day. By the first post I got my directed envelope with a dirty scrap of paper enclosed on which was written with a carpenter's pencil in a sprawling hand, Sam Bloxham, Corcoran's 4, Potter's Court, Bartell Street, Walworth. Arsk for the Depite? Sure. I got the letter in bed and rose without waking Mina. She looked heavy and sleepy and pale and far from well. I determined not to wake her, but that when I should return from this new search I would arrange for her to go back to Exeter. I think she would be happier in our home, with her daily tasks to interest her, than in being here amongst us and in ignorance. I only saw Dr. Seward for a moment, and I told him where I was off to, promising to come back and tell the rest so soon as I should have found out something. I drove to Waleworth and found, with some difficulty, Potter's Court. Mr. Smollett's spelling misled me, and I asked for Potter's Court instead of Potter's Court. However, when I had found the court, I had no difficulty in discovering Corcoran's lodging house. When I asked the man who came to the door for the Depite, he shook his head and said,
I dunno him. There ain't no such a person here. Never heard of him in all my bloomin' days. Don't believe me, there ain't nobody of that kind living here or anywheres.
Nope, wrong guy. Here we go. And then Dracula showed up and was like, what's up, my dude? I took out Smollett's letter, and as I read it, it seemed to me that the lesson of the spelling of the names of the court might guide me. What are you? I asked.
I'm a deputy.
He answered. Oh my god, it's so hard to swap to the NPC. Hey. Psst. Sherlock, you are driving me crazy right now. What is happening? Stop going back there, please. Oh my god. Come on then. Get out of here. Come on. Get out of here. Go on. Thank you. All my blooming days. He keeps walking behind my monitors and almost knocking over my camera, and I'm losing my mind. Do not jump back up here. You will not stay. I do love you, though.
I'm
There. What? Okay.
the deputy.
He answered. I saw at once that I was on the right track. Phonetic spelling had again misled me. A half-crown tip put the deputy's knowledge at my disposal, and I learned that Mr. Bloxham, who had slept off the remains of his beer on the previous night at Corcoran's, had left for his work at Poplar at 5 o'clock that morning.
He could not tell me where the place of work was situated, but he had a vague idea that it was some kind of a newfangled warehouse, and with this slender clue I had to start for Poplar. It was 12 o'clock before I got any satisfactory hint of such a building, and this I got at a coffee shop where some workmen were having their dinner. One of these suggested that there was being erected at Cross Angel Street a new cold storage building, and as this suited the condition of a newfangled warehouse, I at once drove to it. An interview with a surly gatekeeper and a surlier foreman, both of whom were appeased with the coin of the realm, put me on the track of Bloxham. He was sent for on my suggesting that I was willing to pay his day's wages to his foreman for the privilege of asking him a few questions on a private matter. He was a smart enough fellow, though rough of speech and bearing. When I had promised to pay for his information and given him an earnest, he told me that he had made 2 journeys between Carfax and a house in Piccadilly, and had taken from his house to the latter 9 great boxes, main heavy ones, with a horse and cart hired by him for this purpose. I asked him if he could tell me the number of the house in Piccadilly, to which he replied,
Well, governor, I forgets the number.
"Why do they all talk like this?"
But it was only a few doors from being a big white church or something of the kind. Not long built. It was a dusty old house, too. Though nothing of the dustiness of the house we took the bloomin' boxes from.
How did you get into the houses if they were both empty?
There was an old party what engaged me and a waiting in the house at Purfleet. Helped me to lift the boxes and put 'em in the dray. Cursed me, but it was the strongest chap I ever struck. And him an old fellow with a white moustache. One that thin you would think you couldn't throw a shadow.
And oh, how this phrase thrilled me.
Why, he took it up his end on the boxes like they was pounds of tea, and me a puffin' and a blowin' afore I could upend mine anyhow, and I'm no chicken neither.
How? Nope. It's me, Dracula. He's talking about me, maybe. It's really hard. It's really hard to do the NPC because I need 2 fingers, but one hand is holding the book, so I can't set the book down. What is happening over here? Okay. Okay. And how did you get into the house in Piccadilly? I asked.
He was there too. He was, there we go. He was there too. He must have started off and got there afore me, for when I rung a bell, he came and opened the door himself and helped me carry the boxes into it and all.
The whole 9? I asked.
Yeah! There was 5 in the first load, 4 in the second. It was main dry work, and I ain't so well remember how I got 'em.
I interrupted him. Were the boxes left in the hall? Oh. Yeah. Yep.
Yep. It was big all. There was nothing else in it.
I made one more attempt to further matters. And you didn't have a key?
Never used no key or nothing. Old Genty opened the door himself and shut it again when I drove off. Don't remember the last time, but that was a beer.
And you can't remember the number of the house?
No, sir. But you needn't have no difficulty about that. It's iron with a stone front with a bow on it. And I steps all up to the doors. I know them steps. Haven't had to carry your boxes up with 3 loafers what come round to earn a copper. The old gent give 'em shillings, and they seen they got so much they wanted more, but he took one of 'em by the shoulder and was like a throw him down the steps till the lot of 'em went away cussin'.
I thought that with this description I could find the house. Having paid my friend for his information, I started off for Piccadilly. I had gained a new painful experience. The Count could, it was evident, handle the earth boxes himself. If so, time was precious, for now that he had achieved a certain amount of distribution, he could, by choosing his own time, complete the task unobserved. At Piccadilly Circus, I discharged my cab and walked westward. Beyond the Junior Constitutional, I came across the house described, and was satisfied that this was the next of the lairs arranged by Dracula. The house looked as though it had been long untenanted. The windows were encrusted with dust, the shutters were up, the framework was black with time, and from the iron the paint had mostly scaled away. It was evident that up to lately there had been a large notice board in front of the balcony. It had, however, been roughly torn away. The uprights which had supported it still remained. Behind the rails of the balcony I saw that there were some loose boards, whose raw edges looked white. I would have given a good deal to have been able to see the notice board intact, as it would perhaps have given some clue to the ownership of the house. I remember my experience of the investigation and purchase of Carfax, and I could not but feel that if I could find the former owner, there might be some means discovered of gaining access to the house. There was at present nothing to be learned from the Piccadilly side. Nothing could be done. And so I went around to the back to see if anything could be gathered from this quarter. The mews were active, the Piccadilly houses being mostly in occupation. I asked one or two of the grooms and helpers whom I saw around if they could tell me anything about the empty house. One of them said he heard it had lately been taken, but he couldn't say from whom. He told me, however, that up to very lately there had been a notice board of a for sale up, and that perhaps Mitchell, Sons and Candy, the house agents, could tell me something. He thought he remembered seeing the name of that firm on the board. I did not wish to seem too eager or to let my informant know of the guest too much, so, thanking him in my usual manner, I strolled away. It was now growing dusk, and the autumn night was closing in, so I did not lose any time. Having learned the address of Mitchell, Sons and Candy from a directory at the Berkeley, I was soon at their office in Sackville Street. The gentleman who saw me was particularly suave in manner, but uncommunicative in equal proportion. Having once told me that the Piccadilly mansion, which throughout our interview he called a mansion, was sold, he considered my business as concluded. When I asked who had purchased it, he opened his eyes a thought wider and paused a few seconds before replying, "It's sold, sir." "Well, oh my God, I keep doing that. Well, pardon me," I said with equal politeness, "but I have a special reason for wishing to know who purchased it." Again he paused longer and raised an eyebrow still more. "It is sold, sir," was again his laconic reply. "Surely," I said, "you do not mind letting me know so much." "Oh, but I do mind," he answered. "The affairs of their clients are absolutely safe in the hands of Mitchell, Sons and Candy." This was manifestly a prig of the first water, and there was no use arguing with him. I thought I had best meet him on his own ground, and so I said, "Your clients, sir, are happy in having so resolute a guardian of their confidence. I am myself a professional man." I handed him my card. In this instance I am not prompted by curiosity. I act on the part of Lord Godalming, who wishes to know something of the property which was, he understood, lately for sale. These words put a different complexion on affairs. He said, "Well, I would like to oblige you if I could, Mr. Harker, and especially would I like to oblige his lordship. We once carried out a small matter renting some chambers for him when he was the Honourable Arthur Holmwood. If you would let me have his lordship's address, I will consult the house on the subject, and will in any case communicate with his lordship by tonight's post. It will be a pleasure, if we can so far deviate from our rules as to give the required information to his lordship." I wanted to secure a friend and not make an enemy, so I thanked him, gave the address at Dr. Seward's, and came away. It was now dark, and I was tired and hungry. I got a cup of tea at the Aerated Bread Company and came down to Purfleet by the next train. I found all the others at home, Mina looking tired and pale, but made a gallant effort at being bright and cheerful. It wrung my heart to think that I had had to keep anything from her and caused her inquietude. Thank God, this will be the last night of her looking at our conferences, and feeling the sting of not showing our confidence. It took all my courage to hold to the wise resolution of keeping her out of our grim task. She seemed somehow more reconciled, or else the very subject seems to have become repugnant to her. When any accidental allusion is made, she actually shudders, and I am glad we made our resolution in time, as with such a feeling as this our growing knowledge would be torture to her. I could not tell the others of the day's discovery until we were alone, and so after dinner, followed by a little music to save appearances even amongst ourselves, I took Mina to her room and left her to go to bed. The dear girl was more affectionate with me than ever, clung to me as though she would detain me. There was much to be talked of, and I came away. Thank God, the ceasing of telling things has made no difference between us. When I came down again, I found the others had gathered around the fire in the study. In the train, I wrote my diary so far and simply read it off to them as the best means of letting them get abreast of my own information. When I had finished, Van Helsing said,
"Well, this has been a great day's work, friend Jonathan. Doubtless we are on track of the missing boxes, and if we find them all in that house, our work is near the end. But if there is some missing, we must search until we find them. Then shall we make our final coup and hunt the wretch to his real death."
We all sat silent a while, and at once Mr. Morris spoke. "Well, say now, how are we gonna get into that house?" Well, we got into the other," answered Lord Godalming quickly. "Well, but Art, this is different. We broke house at Carfax, but we had night and a walled park to protect us. It'll be a mighty different thing to commit burglary in Piccadilly, either by day or night. I confess I don't see how we're gonna get it unless the agency duck can find us a key of some sort. Perhaps, we'll know when you get his letter in the morning." Lord Godalming's brows contracted, and he stood up and walked about the room. By and by he stopped and said, turning from one to another of us, "Quincy's had his level. This burglary business is getting serious. We got off once all right, but we have now a rare job on hand unless we can find the Count's key basket." As nothing could well be done before morning, and as it would be at least advisable to wait until Lord Godalming could hear from Mitchell's, we decided not to take any active step before breakfast. For a good while we sat and smoked, discussing the matter in its various lights and bearings. I took the opportunity of bringing this diary right up to the moment. I am very sleepy, and I shall go to bed. Just a line, but Mina sleeps soundly, and her breathing is regular. Her forehead is puckered up into wrinkles, as though she thinks even in her sleep. She's too pale, but does not look so haggard as she did this morning. Tomorrow will, I hope, mend all of this. She will be at home in Exeter. Oh, but I am sleepy. I know. I was literally about to say, even the ones who weren't there for Lucy, right? Like Jonathan. Jonathan has read the account. They all have. They've all read every single diary entry that anyone has made up to this point, right? How, if anyone in my life, after reading all of that and knowing that it was real, if anyone in my life was suddenly tired and pale and didn't seem like themselves, I would not immediately be like, well, they're just sad. I'd be like, homie, show me your body. Do you have bites? Do you wear wigs? I need to know everything. Like, come on. These dudes are like, we failed Mina. Or we failed Lucy, but we won't fail Mina. We will protect her by ignoring all of the red flags. Like, dude. Actually wild. Now we go back to Dr. Seward. Dr. Seward's diary, October 1st. I am puzzled afresh about Renfield. His moods change so rapidly I find it difficult to keep touch of them, and as they always mean something more than his own well-being, they form a more than interesting study. This morning when I went to see him after his repulse of Van Helsing, his manner was that of a man commanding destiny. He was, in fact, commanding destiny subjectively. He did not really care for any of the things of mere earth. He was in the clouds. He looked down on all the weaknesses and wants of us poor mortals, and I thought I would improve the occasion and learn something. So I asked, "What about the flies these times?" He smiled on me in quite a superior sort of way, a smile as would have become the face of Malvolio, and he answered me, "The fly, my dear sir, has one striking feature. Its wings are typical of the aerial patterns of the psychic faculties. The ancients did well when they typified the soul as a butterfly." I thought I would punish his analogy to its utmost logically, so I said, "Oh, it is a soul that you're after now, is it?" His madness foiled his reason, and a puzzled look spread over his face. As shaking his head with a decision which I had but seldom seen on him, he said,
No, I don't want souls. I want life. Life is all I want."
and here he brightened up.
"I am pretty indifferent about it at present. Life is all right. I have all I want. You must get a new patient, doctor, if you want to study zoophagy.
Zoophagy. One moment. Zoophagy. Zoophagy. It's his eating flies, eating rats, eating it's that. Eating spiders. Oh, here we go. The internet is gonna say it for us. Power off? What do you mean power off? Alright, let's go.
Zoophagy.
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 Zoophagy. Got it. Nice. We learned. Yeah, it's okay, hold on. I will read you the definition. The feeding on animals by other animals. So what we all do that. The word carnivore is now used to describe flesh eaters. Modern society might still find a use for an obscure term like zoophagy. Really? Do we think so? One of the descriptions specified small things, like eating small animals whole. So I don't know if that's more like its use in this case, right? Because Renfield is straight up just like, look at this cool spider I found, and just pops it in his mouth to eat the life out of it, you know, like we all do. This puzzled me a little, and so I drew him on. Then you command life. You're a god, I suppose? He smiled with an ineffable, benign superiority. Oh no, far be it from me to arrogate. Jesus Christ, this book. Far be it from me to arrogate to myself this especially holy shit. Far be it from me to arrogate to myself the attributes of a deity. I'm not even concerned in his especially spiritual doings. If I may state my intellectual position that I'm in, so far as concerns things purely terrestrial, somewhat in the position which Enoch occupied spiritually. This was a poser to me. I could not at the moment recall Enoch's appositeness. So I had to ask a simple question, though I felt that by doing so I was lowering myself in the eyes of a lunatic. Why Enoch? Because he walked with God. I could not see the analogy, but did not like to admit it. You can't see the analogy? That Renfield sees himself as someone who walks with God? You don't see the ties? You don't see why he says that? Okay. I harked back to what he had denied. So you don't care about life. You don't want souls. Why not? I put my question quickly and somewhat sternly on purpose to disconcert him. The effort succeeded. An instant he unconsciously relapsed into his old servile manner, bent low before me, actually fawned upon me as he replied, I don't want souls. Indeed, I don't. I couldn't use them if I had them. They would be no manner of use to me. I couldn't eat them or... He suddenly stopped, and the cunning look spread over his face like a wind sweep on the surface of the water. And doctor, as to life, what is it after all? When you've got all you require, you know that you will never want. I have friends, good friends like you, Dr. Seward. This was said with a leer of inexpressible cunning. I know that I'll never lack the means of life. I think that through the cloudiness of his insanity he saw some antagonism in me. He had once fell back on the last refuge of such as he, a dogged silence. After a short time I saw that for the present it was useless to speak to him. He was sulky, so I went away. Later in the day he sent for me, and ordinarily I would not have come without special reason. But just at present I am so interested in him that I would gladly have made an effort. Besides, I'm glad to have anything to help pass the time. Harker is out, following up on clues. So are Lord Godalming and Quincy. Van Helsing sits in my study, poring over records prepared by the Harkers. He seems to think that by accurate knowledge of all details he will light upon the clue. He does not wish to be disturbed in his work without cause. I would have taken him with me to see the patient. Only I thought that after his last repulse, he might not care to go again. There was also another reason. Renfield might not speak so freely before a third person as when he and I are alone. I found him sitting out in the middle of the floor on his stool, a pose which is generally indicative of some mental energy on his part. When I came in, he said at once, as though the question had been waiting on his lips, "What about souls?" It was evident then that my surmise had been correct. Unconscious cerebration was doing its work, even with a lunatic. I determined to have the matter out. "What about them yourself?" I asked. He did not reply for a moment, but looked all around him, up and down, as though he expected to find inspiration. "I don't want souls," he said, in a feeble, apologetic sort of way. The manner seemed preying on his mind, and so I determined to use it, to be cruel, to be kind. I said, "You like life? You want life?" "Yeah, but that's all right. You needn't worry about that." "But," I asked, "how are we to get life without getting the soul also?" It seemed to puzzle him. I followed it up. A nice time you'll have sometime when you're flying out there, with the souls of thousands of flies and spiders, birds and cats buzzing, twittering, and meowing all around you. You've got their lives, you know. So you'll have to put up with their souls. Something seemed to affect his imagination. He put his fingers to his ears. He shut his eyes. He screwed them up tightly, just as a small boy does when his face is being soaped. There was something pathetic in it that touched me. It gave me a lesson. It seemed that before me was a child, though the features were worn, and the stubble on the jaw was white, evident that he was undergoing some process of mental disturbance. And knowing how his past moods had interrupted things seemingly foreign to himself, I thought I would enter into his mind as well as I could and go with him. The first step was to restore confidence. I asked him, speaking pretty loud so that he would hear me through his closed ears, "Would you like sugar to get your flies around again?" He seemed to wake up all at once. He shook his head. With a laugh, he replied, "Well, not much. The flies are poor things after all." After a pause, he added, But I don't want their souls buzzing in me, all the same." "Or spiders?" I went on. "Blow spiders. What's the use of spiders? There isn't anything in them to eat, or—" He stopped suddenly, as though reminded of a forbidden topic. So, I thought to myself, this is the second time he has suddenly stopped at the word drink. What does that mean? Renfield seemed himself aware of having made a lapse. He hurried on as though to distract my attention from it. "Well, I don't take stock of it. You know, rats, mice, small deer, as Shakespeare had it, chicken feed of the larder, you might call them. I'm past all that sort of nonsense. You might as well ask a man to eat molecules with a pair of chopsticks as to try to interest me in lesser carnivore, which I know of what is before me." "Oh, I see," I said. "You want big things that you can take your teeth into. How would you like to breakfast on an elephant?" "What ridiculous nonsense are you talking about?" He was getting too awake. I thought I would press him. "I wonder," I said reflectively, "what an elephant's soul is like." The effect I desired was obtained. He at once fell from his high horse and became a child again. "But I don't want an elephant's soul. I don't want any souls," he said. And for a moment he sat despondently. He jumped to his feet, his eyes ablaze with all the signs of intense cerebral excitement. "To hell with you and your souls," he shouted. "Well, why do you gotta talk to me about souls? Haven't I got enough to worry about? Haven't I got enough worry and pain and distractions already without thinking about souls?" He looked hostile. I thought he was in for another fit, so I blew my whistle. The instant, however, that I did, he became calm. He said apologetically, "Well, forgive me, Doctor. You don't need any help. I'm
I'm just worried about my mind, and I'm apt to be irritable. And if you knew the problem I have to face and that I'm working out, you would pity, tolerate, even pardon me. Pray don't put me in a straight waistcoat. I want to think, and I can't think freely if my body's confined. You get it, right? You understand?
He had evidently self-control. So when the attendants came, I told them not to mind, and they withdrew. Renfield watched them go, and when the door was closed, he said, with considerable dignity and sweetness,
"Well, Dr. Seward, you've been very considerate toward me. I'm very grateful to you."
I thought it well to leave him in this mood, so I came away. There is certainly something to ponder over this man's state. Several points seem to make what the American interviewer calls a story. If one could only get them in proper order, here they are. I will not mention drinking. Fears the thought of being burdened with the soul of anything. Has no dread of wanting life in the future. Despises the meaner forms of life altogether, though he dreads being haunted by their souls. All of these things point one way. He has assurance of some kind that he will acquire higher life. He dreads the consequence, the burden of a soul. So it is a human's life he looks to. And the assurance? Merciful God. The Count has been to him, and there is a new scheme of terror afoot.
Yeah, no duh.
Dude. Okay, we've only got 2 pages left, but I'm going to take a drink of water really quick. Sherlock! I love you so much! Driving me crazy. I love him. This book is kind of dark. It's very dark, yeah. It is. Renfield thinks souls are icky compared to nomming pure life force. I mean, with Renfield, right, it was always an obsession of extending his life. But the idea that the thing that he used to extend his own life has a soul that will haunt him forever freaks him the fuck out. Have you read Monster on your manga podcast? We have. Yeah, I've read quite a bit of Monster. I've never seen the anime, though. But I love Monster. It's very good. Monster is on Netflix right now. I know, I saw. Yeah, Monster is very good. I would highly recommend. Whew, I'm sleepy. Let's finish this up, dude. Yep, got 2 pages left. We can do this. Let's go. I went after my round to Van Helsing and told him my suspicion. He grew grave, and after thinking the matter over for a while, asked me to take him to Renfield. I did so, and as we came to the door, we heard the lunatic within singing gaily as he used to do in the time which now seems so long ago. When we entered, we saw with amazement that he had spread out his sugar as of old. The flies, lethargic with autumn, were beginning to buzz into the room. We tried to make him talk of the subject of our previous conversation, but he would not. He went on with his singing, just as though we had not been present. He got a scrap of paper and was folding it into a notebook. We had to come away as ignorant as we went in. He is a curious case indeed, and we must watch him tonight. My lord, we are at all times too happy to meet your wishes. We beg, with regard to the desire of your lordship expressed by Mr. Harker on your behalf, to supply the following information concerning the sale and purchase of number 347 Piccadilly. The original vendors are the executioners of the late Mr. Archibald Winter Suffield. The purchaser is a foreign nobleman, Count de Ville, who effected the purchase himself, paying the purchase money in notes over the counter. If your lordship will pardon us using so vulgar an expression, beyond this we know nothing whatever of him. We are, my lord, your lordship's humble servants, Mitchell, Sons, and Candy. October 2nd, Dr. Seward's diary. I placed a man in the corridor last night and told him to make an accurate note of any sound he might hear from Renfield's room. Gave him instruction that if there should be anything strange he were to call me. After dinner, when we had all gathered around the fire in the study, Mrs. Harker having gone to bed, we discussed the attempts and discoveries of the day. Harker was the only one who had any result, and we are in great hopes that his clue may be an important one. Before going to bed, I went around to the patient's room and looked in through the observation trap. He was sleeping soundly, and his heart rose and fell with regular respiration. This morning the man on duty reported to me that a little after midnight he was restless and kept saying his prayers somewhat loudly. I asked him if that was all. He replied that that was all he heard. There was something about his manner so suspicious that I asked him point blank if he had been asleep. He denied sleeping, but admitted to having dozed for a while. Is it too bad that men cannot be trusted unless they are watched? Today Harker is out following up on his clue. Art and Quincy are looking after horses. Godalming thinks that it will be well to have horses always in readiness. For when we get the information which we seek, there will be no time to lose. We must sterilize all the important earth between sunrise and sunset. We shall thus catch the Count at his weakest, and without a refuge to fly to, Van Helsing is off to the British Museum, looking up some authorities on ancient medicine. The old physicians took account of things which their followers do not accept, and the professor is searching for witch and demon cures which may be useful to us all later. I sometimes think we must all be mad, and we shall wake to sanity in strait waistcoats. We have met again. We seem at last to be on track, and our work of tomorrow may be the beginning of the end. I wonder if Renfield's quiet has anything to do with this. His moods have so followed the doings of the court that the coming destruction of the monster may be carried to him in some subtle way. If we could only get some hint as to what passed in his mind between the time of my argument with him today and the resumption of fly-catching, it might afford us a valuable clue. He is now seeming quiet for spell. Is he? That wild yell seemed to come from his room. The attendant came bursting into my room and told me that Renfield has somehow met with an accident. He heard him yell, and when he went to him, found him lying on his face on the floor, covered with blood. I must go at once. The end. End chapter 20, and the end of our reading for tonight. Sherlock, I love you so much, you drive me so crazy. Clap, claps. Good job, everybody. We have 7 chapters left of this book. So 2 more of these, and we'll crush it. We'll be done with it. In the meantime, Ouroboron, thank you for the 65 months. Drum for the 51. Vice Surprise for the 16. Avi gifted a bunch of subs. Thank you so much, Avi. Sergio, thank you for the 10. Sarotan, again, welcome to the Cat Gang. Self-Care, Best Care for the 42. Evil Death for the 76. And Svensonitis for the 6 years. Happy anniversary. Thank you so, so much. Let's see. I'm just gonna send you to Sam. I don't know what he's doing, but it's probably cursed, so enjoy. What the fuck? Just let me... Ugh. There. Oh, that's really funny. I didn't mean to... It's fine. Go say hi to Sam. He's my sweet love. Have a fantastic day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm gonna go sleep. Bye-bye.